Nate rolls out the bay doors, and you walk in, and he's got his Super 73 here. This is so California. This is just like good weather outside. It's just like the most California thing ever. Every dude's dream is to have this. Is like now, if you're in business, they have a content creation studio and a badass place to work at, even if you don't make content in the fitness industry, but you're in the fitness. Did you ever try having this as like a man cave studio on site on your own property, like at home? Or did you want because originally I know that we had the protein supplement company for a while, so you probably obviously had the warehouse for that. Is this lease left over from that venture?
Technically, it is the second lease that started with the protein company. We were in a smaller space, and the reason we moved out of the smaller space was because the gym business was kind of growing, and we had more coaches, we just had more employees, just more people on site, and we just needed more space for that. And the supplement company came with us, but it was simultaneously downsizing. So my brother, my cousin, myself, we were taking up a very small footprint in this space. So I knew that this was going to be like the gym. The vision was this being a gym. The old space was kind of like my like so-called man cave. Like it was pallet racks along one wall, fulfillment for the supplement company, but like the rest of the space just wasn't going to get used. And I was like, originally I just was the only one that trained there. I had basic rubber rolled out, and then my personal setup, kind of one of everything. And that's where I trained for the games in 2016, and where I continued to train after that. And then I started to let some clients come in, and then it kind of took off from there.
The supplement company, was that your first venture in, okay, I'm going to do something beyond being a games athlete and probably paid sponsorships and things like that? Did that come in when did that start, and why did you go that route? It probably seems like an easy A to B for most people if they're thinking I'm a games athlete. What will I do as a secondary business stream of income?
Yeah, the supplement business actually started years before that, when I was still an affiliate owner, CrossFit affiliate owner. My customers are asking me all the time for recommendations on supplements. This was I was heavy into the supplementation, phase of my athletic career, using these supplements to support my recovery and just my CrossFit experience. And people were like, hey, what do I take? And, I kind of got tired of being well, go up to this store or go to this website and do this and that. And they didn't really want to do any of that either. And I was formulating something for myself on True Nutrition. Do you remember that website?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
I don't know if they're still around, but it was a pretty killer site. It was
concoct your own.
You concoct your own for formulations, and yet you had a lot of flexibility to make whatever you want. So I was making some formulas, and I was buying them in 50-pound bags, because that was how you get the cheapest deal. And so I was literally just cutting bags in Ziploc bags, and here's a pound, that'll be $30 kind of thing. And I did that long enough where I was moving a decent amount of volume, product in my own gym, and it was maybe another $1,500 take home each month, which was great. And I was this is awesome. And I was okay, this is getting a little out of hand. I don't want to weigh and measure, bags.
It's like a trap house, essentially cutting and bagging. And
it was, my office was everything was a little sticky, at the gym, because there's powder everywhere.
Scales everywhere.
It was bad. So that just, I was okay, well, maybe I can get some of these. And then I think I connected with True Nutrition, and they're hey, we have this co-packer that we work with that does, you can work within our company, our parent company, to just do bigger orders. And so they started sending me 2-pound bags of the same stuff. I made a little sticker. I went on Fiverr or whatever and had a little logo made, and then slapped those on, and people, were happy to have something convenient at the gym. So I had Revive RX was born. I started selling it there. Maybe I sold it at one other gym. Someone's hey, could I sell it here? I had a couple gyms, and I just did it locally. And then my brother and my cousin were kind of transitioning in their careers and moving from one company to the next. They're hey, they want to sink their teeth into something. They're you've got a following. Mm-hmm. You're heavy in the CrossFit community. You're trusted. You have this brand. Can we come in and just, and I was sure, go ahead. Pour all your energy into it, whatever you want to make of it. And so they decided to help or try and scale it. And so that was kind of really
a tough business to step. It's
for sure.
Tough thing to win at.
Totally. It took us 3 years, a lot of hard work, and, challenges in every part of that industry, to realize hey, you know what, this is how much we've grown it. And unless we're going to go and get some big, massive investment, we're going to try and compete with these other brands. what we realized was that in the CrossFit space, like to emerge as like a very powerful supplement company was difficult because the distribution was going to be through CrossFit gyms, and they were not doing the best at like retail,
Sure.
and merchandise and things like that, and they just weren't really running savvy,
Yeah.
retail spaces.
It's one thing to get into a GNC, which that's all they do is churn and burn retail cash all day long. Customers, they know how to sell, versus a CrossFit gym in which it's a seventh thought. It's not even the first six thoughts. It's like, oh yeah, but we got some of this on the shelf.
Yeah. So we had some like really good customers, some loyal gyms and affiliates that were selling our stuff, but it was not like, it was definitely more of like, it was founded on the thought of, I want to provide people with what I'm doing, and I want to have some additional revenue streams in addition to like, a CrossFit affiliate, doing some personal training and a little bit of online remote coaching, and I sell some supplements. And so this was how, like, in my year 4, 5, 6, 7 of being a CrossFit athlete, I was like building a business and building my own, my income and trying to save money and plan for what was coming next.
Yeah. I talk with a lot of guys who want to go the supplement route. Who's the one athlete? His name's Nick Barr, B-A-R. Yeah. So jacked ultra marathon runner guy.
He's got a hell of a supplement
100%.
company.
Yeah, and his podcast is solid. He's got a big supplement company. I forget the name of it. There are a lot of guys who want to get into that. And there's no such thing. I don't believe in an easy money. I don't believe there's any such thing as easy money.
Yeah.
When did you decide to call quits on that?
I mean, I was I never went full in on it. Like it was sort of, I was full in on developing my coaching business, and my cousin and my brother were all in on the supplement company until the point at which it was like, okay, this isn't supporting two, incomes, it's supporting one income. So brother went back, got a job. I have this full-time job. My cousin's trying to operate this company, and it really needed more support than that. And after like 2-3 years where it was like, okay, it's not going to grow into something, and I think my cousin was ready to just like take on something that he could really sink his teeth into. It was like, yeah, it's time to shut it down.
I think there's a lot to be learned in those instances of business ideas that they're certainly not failures by any stretch, but they weren't home runs. They were a single, they were a bunt. They got you on base and allowed you kind of get to feel it out. What would you say in this world? Because again, like when you have a following, and there's a lot of people who have amassed a following, and they don't have a clear monetization structure. And the first thing in the fitness industry you think about is going to be supplementation to pitch. Even as gyms, it's funny. We'll talk about like your Hermosi dinner and stuff like that. But Alex, one of his big things that he really did post gym launch, when gym launch kind of, I wouldn't say it hit a plateau, and I'm not close enough to that business to know kind of where it was at, but was installing supplements into the gyms. Because again, it's just an area that a lot of people don't. But if you go to any Gold's Gym, I mean, that's a foundation of their pro shop, right? Kind of scenario. What would you say to anyone who's amassed somewhat of a following and like the supplement thing? Would you say like, dude, don't even fuck with it. Like, don't mess with it. Or like, if you do, you're going to need to show up with a good chunk of cash to actually make a dent in this industry.
Yeah, I think, I guess it depends on how, like, what kind of following we're talking about. If you got like Liver King size following, then, make a Liver King bar, and, it's aligned with your brand and people are going to go for it. If you have a following that like trusts you and you believe in some supplements yourself, like probably go the affiliate route and basically represent another brand that has the cash, has the infrastructure, is doing the thing.
Don't do the inventory and bring it all in-house yourself.
No, for sure not. I think that might be a really good way to go. Like nowadays, like I'm not going to touch going back into supplements, unless there was a big change in our business down the road and we had, a distribution channel like a bunch of functional bodybuilding gyms or something like that, which is exactly what, Alex did with Prestige Labs and Gym Launch. It was like, okay, you got thousands of gyms that are basically doing his
already trust you, know you, and pay you. So.
And you're wanting to support those gyms by teaching them how to make another revenue stream. It's like, hey, we got this supplement brand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would, and then the only other, I guess the other thing is, if you have something, which it's harder and harder to these days, but if you actually have something that's unique and that like, there's like a sort of an up and coming emerging supplement or compound that is like, you know, doing something for people. Like if you're just going to knock off another pre-workout or just do another, you know, whey, or like, just don't bother with when you're going up against huge corporations that have massive spend, and they're getting wise to like what the consumer wants in terms of quality. Like we came out at a time with Revive RX, which was like, you know, in the CrossFit space, like wanting in a community that was kind of starting to demand higher quality foods and not really into the process, like, you know, filler ingredients. Like it was hard to go to a supplement shop and find something that like aligned with the CrossFit sort of community culture. It was like, I'm going to go buy a bodybuilding supplement for CrossFit. Like that didn't feel right.
Sure.
So, I mean, there have been brands that have emerged from, Progenics had a great run that fell off, but you know, there've been other companies along the way that have done some good things in the CrossFit space. Now there's, you know, whoever Heber and Mars are, you know, partnering with HWPO to like put whatever that brand is.
Okay.
There's Podium.
Okay.
Is
Podium,
like a
that's right.
supplement brand, right?
Podium, something.
So there's like, they're trying to really like own that space of functional, you know, functional fitness and CrossFit.
Yeah. Thorne. They partnered with CrossFit, I think, recently. Thorne supplements.
Okay. Yeah, but see, Thorne was like they're just like a super high quality brand that resonated with this CrossFit community, and they just sort of came in, but they already had
their audience.
Yeah, through pretty much like being in, you know, every major sport. And yeah, so anyhow, that's my cautionary tale about, you know, jumping into supplements. And nowadays, like, you know, I've gone through at like post competitive fitness, you know, my supplementation regimen has just like, you know, it's not as dramatic, and I don't use as much. Like I don't, you know, take shakes every day, and I'm not doing pre-workouts, and I'm not doing the whole concoctions. Like I've got some like, you know, supplements I'll take as sort of a base nutritional support, but it's like not the anchor point of what I'm doing.
Sure. And this, I'm going to ask you this, and this is definitely going to be some clickbait for some micro content on here, but going back to an individual you mentioned, is Liver King on steroids? What's your take?
I mean,
you had to guess.
If I had to guess?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the way I view individuals who may or may not be on steroids is my first assumption for as long as I've been in fitness and coming up and trying to get strong and put on muscle was just like, whoa, that's impressive. What do I need to do to get better? Because like that's better than what I have right now. And it's always inspired me to want to like, what is this person doing that I could bring into my life that I'm not doing, you know? And I've never gone to the like steroids or drugs or some shortcut first. And it goes all the way back to when I was like, you know, really naive and didn't know anything. And I was at the gym when I was 15 years old. I'm like, well, that guy's huge. Like, you know, watching him do his sets of incline press, I'm like, well, that's how I need to grow my chest to like basically choke myself out.
Yeah.
Right?
So I can't see my own apple.
Yeah. Plus, like I've personally been very focused on all the things that I think Liver King has been promoting that are just really, you know, anybody can bring into their life.
Sound principles.
Yeah, sound principles of just, you know, getting the best out of life and what's free out there for our health, and things that I've been talking about for a lot of years too. It's like, hey, you know, get good sleep, get sun exposure, eat quality foods, you know, move around, like have good connections with the people in your life, like, you know, create relationships. But it's just resonating a lot more with people, and they're actually like, yeah, they're buying his supplements, and they're also like going and walking barefoot on the ground and like getting in the sun each day and, you know, lifting heavy stuff. And it's like, well, that's a win.
It's interesting because, you know, my guess to your response to the answer was going to be, you know, I don't know if he says he's not, because you get accused of shit all the time, right?
Totally,
you constantly get that. You get that all the time.
Less so in the last like 6 to 12 months, but
due to repetition of you having like the consistency of like over the years, people are able to do the Google machine and go back and be like, oh, He was, again, skinny for the 2 years, maybe when he was off on his spiritual awakening and post, before med school. And then, I see CrossFit. He's here. He's bigger. He's wider. And then do you think it's that, or do you think it's the repetition of you having to just drill in people's heads and the content that you put out?
To be honest, I don't know. I think it might be just the repetition of seeing, like,
or the trolls have just moved on to Liver King.
They maybe, yeah. Or they're like, well, maybe this guy's not. 'Cause like these other people are way bigger. I still have a few videos out there on YouTube that continue to get views of like the before and after, like when I was competing versus now. And I did like a episode on like the thumbnails, like it's got steroids on it, like, and basically I was like trying to just give like a general story of like, hey, this is how these changes have happened for me over the years. Because I got questions like, hey, you posted a picture of you competing in CrossFit in 2016. You post a picture now, like how much muscle mass did you lose? Like what changed? What's your diet like now versus then? And like I made a video to like basically answer all the questions I got, and it did not occur to me that like the obvious thing that people were going to think as soon as they saw that was like, well, obviously you just went off steroids and that's why you're this size now. And I was like, how did I miss that? Like, I should have addressed that right there. I didn't address it. It wasn't even on my mind. Okay, I'll make a follow-up video where I basically say like, hey, look, this is my experience in CrossFit competing. This is what I was capable of doing natural. Like, are there people using it? Clearly there are, because there's been people getting popped in the last many years. If I had to like wager money that the majority of top people during my era of CrossFit were not on drugs, and we were just redefining what it meant to be like ultra fit in this particular way. And nobody had ever seen it before. We were just like exploring a whole new world of like fitness. And we're like, oh, I didn't know people could do that. It's like, yeah, you actually can do that if you train like this. And then if you train like this and do steroids, like, whoa, maybe you can do this. And that's maybe what we're seeing more these days. I don't really know. I mean, I know there's been a lot of drug positive tests in the last, like, build up to the CrossFit Games this year, but I don't follow it closely enough to know.
It's just the nature of more money coming into the sport. And that's every sport out there forever and ever, forever, trying to get an edge. That's just going to be the nature of the sport.
Well, and I also think it's like people are driven to get an edge in life, and there's the path of doing it without enhancements. And if it's early days in a new sport or a new business or you don't have to cut corners, because you just can see like dramatic improvements by just doing the thing in CrossFit. Look at what people were doing in 2007 at the games. Like that level of fitness at the time seemed kind of mind-boggling, but it's like we had just scratched the surface on a training methodology and getting people to train at a very high volume with mixed modal fitness. And the next 6-7 years, like, you didn't need to touch drugs to like, whoa, this is a really potent thing. You can just get better.
Yeah,
I kind of was in that wave of like, we were just uncovering new methods and pouring a ton of training volume and just dedicating our whole life and sacrificing everything. And as a result, we got fit, like super fit, and there was no need to cut corners. And then eventually that curve starts to flatten out, where it's like, okay, now we've kind of
done everything.
Yeah, like it took a Rich Froning to take it to the next level, then Matt Fraser to take it to the next level. Now everyone's training like that. And it's like, okay, well, everyone's doing the same thing. Like, how else do I get an edge? People are still desire to be the best and find the edge. And there's no like secret, like, I remember in 2010, there was like the CrossFit football maybe came out or something like that. And people were like, oh, maybe this is the way to like strength bias, and this is what's going to get me better. Like nobody's coming out in 2022 with like the new secret to like training for CrossFit. It's like, no, you just train a ton, you build a massive aerobic engine, you get strong as shit, and then you just
endurance for days.
Who's the most resilient and who has the right biomechanics, like who's got the right levers and who's got the right, basic body shape and size, and that's kind of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I go back to even that Liver King conversation. I find myself analyzing how people use their megaphones these days and what gives someone an edge from a content standpoint. And I look at a Liver King, and he checks all the visual whoa, what the fuck is that? What am I looking at? Boxes, right? The beard, short as hell, jacked, tan, shirtless. And so I'm always looking at someone who's created a following or definitely has an online presence, and I'm looking at what is it about them that creates a megaphone? Because there are plenty of guys we can find on YouTube and social media right now that are talk about ancestral traits and living closer to the earth and walking around barefoot and
Yeah.
and it's like those guys, I picture them at home like, God damn it, I've been making videos and a podcast for 4 years and it never caught. Like this guy shows up and, why did that pop for him? For you, when you started making content and you had to put yourself out there at such a scale, and it was no longer like the games level where like you were able to grab some photos that they took at the game, like you were able to reshare some of that. In your head, did you ever think about that and strategize? But okay, well, what am I going to do? YouTube's deep. Yeah, I've got a following. Yeah, people know me in this niche of the fitness industry. But what am I going to do to enhance my megaphone or create my own unique megaphone in that case?
No, I never thought about it. I it wasn't probably until the last couple of years after we had built a very big following and a fairly successful business that we started to think like, what do we need to start doing with our content to try and like, reach new people or, reignite kind of the rapid growth that we saw at different time points. I think, there were a few factors that just played into me having early success on social media, just some timing things. And I mean, not to say that it was all like good fortune, but there was a lot of good fortune that came along with it. I think there was really good content that people resonated with, but it felt very natural for me to make. And it wasn't like very produced, early on. I just had one kind of mission, which was basically document my own personal journey through becoming the best CrossFit athlete that I could be, but doing it with like, what were considered amongst that community, like sort of fringe principles. Like, hey, here's a guy that doesn't train, the same way everybody else trains. He's not going 100% every day. He's talking about building an aerobic base. He's talking about pacing. There's some thought in this design. And, that was a product of like the coaches I had at the time who were giving me this training. But like I was showing it in a way that basically explained, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And then once I got out of CrossFit, I continued to like hold true to that mission, which was like, I'm just going to document and share what I'm going through on the journey to be, continue to be an athlete, but also build a business and be a father and, look good and move well and basically do this for a long time because I fell in love with fitness before CrossFit, unlike most people at the time who just got introduced to weight training with CrossFit and that's what like grew their deep love for it. It's like, no, I loved it before I knew about suffering in the gym. Like I knew about it when I loved fitness when it came to like coming in and working hard, but it wasn't about coming in and like trying to puke and like trying to max out my lifts. And it was like to come in and, push against weight and build muscle and get on the stair climber and get my heart pumping. And like, that was cool. And that felt great. And I missed that. And I was like, how do I get back to just the love of coming in and working hard, but not the love of coming in and like beating myself to death for points. Yeah. And how do I show that to people? And so that all just like, that just resonated, I think, with a lot of CrossFitters who were like, yeah, I don't want to suffer every day anymore. I want to kind of feel good, and I still want to do this stuff because it's rad. I know you're in that camp too. It's like I want to push sleds, I want to lift weights, I want to, jump on a box from time to time. I want to do cardio and weights at the same time. Like I want to do all this stuff, but I don't need to like win the race and go faster than my teammate.
As a third party, like watching you and your content, and that's kind of the vein I'm always thinking of. This is kind of how I always perceived your megaphone, the thing I always thought of when I watched your content. So I see, YouTube, you start doing the YouTube, and, obviously YouTube's the platform people purposely go to watch. It's the only platform you don't have to put subtitles on, right? When I explain like content strategy to people, it's the only one people purposely go to watch a video. Talking head videos historically do really well on YouTube. Even if we're talking a straight talking head, no cut up B-roll, nothing added over top of it. And Marcus always, I believe, was just this very well, you're an alpha in competition, and physically people admire and want to maybe emulate this, and you instantly garner their respect, just an authority the second your video of you working out shows up. But I always felt your megaphone was actually like this calm, steady, almost philosophical, stoic kind of approach you just took to it. Like, your videos feel like a conversation. Like, literally, if I was paying you as a nutritional coach or a coach and I sat down and we're having it, I feel like you were talking to me. I felt empathy coming through. And I've used you in examples for people who are trying to create an online presence. I'm like, here's some different personas and people who've got a megaphone. I've shown yours. I've even shown what Hermosi got on his. I'm like, look at this. This guy's going to be a billionaire probably. He's probably going to be well on his way. Look at this video. What stands out? Like, he's wearing a wife beater, and like he's got a shitty acquisition hat on, and he's got a breathe right strip over his nose, and he looks like he's sitting in a closet. I'm like, does that look like the setup that a multi-millionaire would have? I'm like, no.
Right.
I'm like, that contrast alone is very intriguing and draws in. Look at Liver King, doing push-ups on the subway shirtless, or lunging down in front of the Liberty Bell with dumbbells in his hands. So I'm always looking at the megaphone as far as that goes. When you started creating content, or what do you guys think about it? Is there someone else out there making content you're like, I like the way they do it, or it inspires me to think more about it? Because when you first turn on the camera, I agree. I bet you probably went this is just how I would talk. Like, this is you and me doing this. This is what we did at dinner last night. We just now have cameras on.
Right.
Did you ever look at anyone and be like, that's a really good way to I like how he's done that, and then you download that somewhere in the back of your head, and so that when your red light comes on in your camera, you emulate? Because we all, when we're doing something unknown, we all emulate someone else who's done it that we've watched to a degree.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are things that I feel like I do well in content, and then there's areas that I feel like I need to look at others for inspiration.
What are those?
Well, there's a bit of like the storytelling about me and like my personality and my life. Like, I think it's been hard to be a husband and a father and have like a personal life and protect that, and not make it like, as public as, what's happening in the gym.
Do you and your wife have a rule on that? Like, hey, social media on us and the family, minimal? Or, I mean, because I've seen videos of your wife and you working out.
Yeah.
Seen pictures of the kiddos. But do you guys have kind of
no,
official?
we don't have like an official rule, although it has been like, hey, when do I know you're like here with us, and when are you like on work, And that's kind of been like a hard line to sort of navigate, because I know that when people understand me and like they get to know the person as much as the coach, that has the power to build trust. And I think that I represent a lot of what our customers' lives look like. I mean, people assume like, hey, you're just this like pro athlete who's just training all the time. I mean, as I get further away from like my competitive years, there's maybe a little less than that, but I think there's this assumption. It's like, hey, you're just a machine that's like in the gym all the time. And I'm like, well, no, it's like this morning, like, I was up from 1 to 2:30 with my daughter, trying to get her to go back to bed. Then I was up at 5 o'clock, getting the day started, packing them up, getting their lunches made, like making them breakfast, like, getting them out of bed, dressed. We're going on a trip this evening. I had to pack up some things in the car, and my wife did a ton of packing last night. Then I'm like dropping them off early so I can get here. Like, I haven't touched a weight. I haven't done any movement yet today. Like, I had a little small breakfast. Like, I'm just moving it through life in a way that a lot of people that we coach and that subscribe to our channel are moving through life too. I want to like showcase that, be like, hey, like I have this life in these constraints, and I still want to prioritize my health, and I want to, be selfish with my fitness and my health and fitness, so that I can also be the best dad I can be. So, coming back to the question, it's like, who do I look to? It's like, I try and look to people who maybe have entrepreneurs, coaches in the space, who also have like families and kids, and be like, hey, what are they doing? How are they, navigating this, showing their presence as like a person, like their personality on story, authentic ways. And then I also look at people that like, okay, I know this individual has nothing going on in their life except for business and themselves. They don't have kids. They like, this is not like who I am. They have a lot more time to like invest in this process. You know, how are they coming across? What are they taking advantage of when they have additional time on their plate to develop content and to show the personal life? And so I'm not like, I don't have any specific names to shoot you with right now, but there definitely is, something that I'm constantly looking, you know, to sort of show a little bit more of like the behind the scenes of like my life.
Real life, yeah.
That will, I think, is quite relatable.
And then does that mean that there's got to be then a conversation? Because I've seen content creators who have allowed, you know, I'll use for example when Miranda and Julian allowed had the vlog of her doing the at home birth, and they kind of followed her through her pregnancy. I think it was the first one maybe. And she did the at-home birth, you know, tub, the whole deal, to show the audience that behind the scenes a little bit more of the human side of like, yeah, I get bags under my eyes because my daughter, you know, is sleeping in the bed kind of scenario. Is that is that something, you know, having to have a conversation with the family and being like, hey, I'd like to share a little bit of what we do here as well. What's on limits, off limits? I've always thought like I probably have some of the best conversations when I pick my daughter up from school where I have to use my dad brain. I'm having to use my business brain. I'm having to like sell her on ideas like half the time. Like, honey, we don't want to do that. No, you cannot punch that boy in the eye. I'm having to sell her on things. And then there's this other side of me. And I'm like, man, this would be so interesting because I bet you a lot of my people who watch myself just think that I'm just, you know, I do this, I swear on camera, I do whatever. It's like there's this other side that I think connects all that. But it could be, it's a really interesting third layer or fourth degree or whatever you want to call it for them to see.
I think there's like this move in, you know, social media and content creation towards like people really admiring and respecting just transparency about what's really going on. Like it's so fun. You know, we already talked about steroids a bit and PEDs, but I think what I'm finding to be so interesting is that like there really genuinely seems to be this like massive acceptance of like, hey, if you're doing something, just tell us and we're cool with that, you know? And I'm like, wow, that's really remarkable. That really is a shift from 10 years ago, you know, and now it's like, I think that just speaks to people wanting to I just really want to know what's going on. They assume probably that they're educated enough and they're wise enough to like, okay, as long as I know the truth, then I'll pick out the things that I like. You know, I mean, people say that probably about Liver King, like, hey, I don't care if he's on steroids. Like, you know, I like what he's doing here. I like what he's doing here. I like what he's doing here. And I'm still going to buy his supplements. It's like, okay, great.
The transparency. I took a photo one time. It was on the left-hand side, it was my prescription of Adderall. Then it was a vial of test sip, and then it was a bottle of whiskey, and then the multivitamins or something I take. And I took a photo. I'm like, this is my entrepreneurial stack.
Yeah,
I've been on Adderall since whatever high school. I experimented with steroids in college heavily. Got up to like 215 pounds. Had a mohawk. For flag football, I was a god. I would destroy you in flag football up the D line. But beyond that, it was and then that just completely wrecked me. Did it under the guise of a doctor, and I remember him telling me, he's like, "Hey man, I get it. You're really into this anabolic chemistry," and I truly was. I thought that was almost the route for a moment in time. I thought I was going to go down, and I really got into it. He's like, "But you know, you're going to get to your mid-30s at some point, or maybe later, maybe sooner." And you're going to notice you do not feel the same and as healthy as you did. And you poured kerosene on a fire that was already raging too early on. But, you know, here you go. Here's your liver panels. Here's all that. You'll do this. Make sure you don't fuck yourself up right now.
Yeah.
But it will long term. And it sure did. Went down, I don't know, it's probably about like 4 years ago. I used to be able to run 16, 18-hour days. And it just unfazed. I mean, I was just like, and I always was just on tie, just whatever. And it crashed. Sex drive crashed. Energy crashed. Creative mental clarity crashed. Everything. And then when I got T levels tested and, you know, down in the high 3s, and they brought me back up, and that's been almost 2 years ago. And it, you know, so I remember doing that and being like, oh my God, I'm kind of embarrassed by this. And then putting it out there, it was just like, it was good because it's so out of my realm too. I just talk business. Business is all I talk. And then just that one little like personal anecdotal take a look inside my this one of my skeletons in a closet was super interesting. Like just some of the conversations I had. I'm like, this isn't me talking to a gym owner about, comp plans. This is like someone who's like been hiding it from his wife because he's scared to let his wife know he's on TRT or something. I was like, it was out of my lane. It's not that I would really dive into. I'd never, obviously talking about it here. I'm not embarrassed to talk about it, but it's really interesting. Like you said, the transparency and the vulnerability, because that becomes in my opinion, that becomes the X factor. We all can make awesome 3-camera setup content and podcast and this and that, but the only real X factor at a certain point when everyone's making this level of content is like reality TV. That's why reality TV is so potent. Now, reality TV, I believe, is on the far end of the spectrum of bullshit, scripted just for the shock factor. But take a couple layers back. It's very authentic to see someone cry or, get into an argument or cheat on their boy or something, right? Like it's super authentic. People are just so drawn into the realness.
Yep.
But yeah,
I mean, by the way, I remember when you posted that. Picture,
okay.
It kind of stood out. It stood out in my mind, and I've thought about it from time to time. And on the personal transparency side of things, it's like I really, you asked like, have I had the conversation with the family? Like, is that something that's on the table to discuss? And it's probably one of the areas that I have struggled with the most in the past, really 6 years. My daughter's 5.5. Is that my business really started to, take off 6 years ago, right around when she was born. And it was very, very much like this sort of like linear, side-by-side trajectory of, social media growth and business growth, like revenue growth. And so I felt very tied to that. And, I'm as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as somebody who's like just trying to navigate the business world, like I think about it a lot, and I have personal, fears and anxieties about like, well, what if this fails? What if this doesn't go well? Like, what's that going to mean for me as like a human, as a man, as a provider, as for my family, blah, blah, blah. So I will tend to like put a lot of energy and thought into that, more than is healthy. And when I'm doing that as like somebody who's probably pathologically like overthinking the worst case scenario anxiety, is that I will not be as present with my people around me. Like it's like go into a little bit of a tunnel. I'm sure there's plenty of people that can relate to this. And that tunnel is like, I'm less available. Like, hey, daddy, like, yeah, sure. Hold on one second. Like my mind is somewhere else, right? And so this has been like the bulk of the work that I've done on myself over the past 5 years. Yeah, have I been lifting weights? I've been eating well, like trying to stay in shape? Sure. But like I spend the vast majority of my personal work on like this, challenge that I face as a father and as a husband and as a business owner. When it comes to like separating these two things, that's where like the really showcasing my personal journey and personal life through social media, through my, with my family, that's where it gets really like blurry for me. Because I'm like, hey, the second the phone comes out, the camera comes out, and there's a post that's going up, like I'm switching into a business mindset. On the one hand, it's like the more I can be relatable to the audience, I think the more that allows them to trust me and then ultimately let me help them and let us help them as a company. But when I'm sitting there on a Friday night, like with the kids and we're having movie night and they have a friend over and we're just hanging out and I'm just like in the moment, I'm like, this is great. And then I have that moment of like, oh, is this something that needs to be captured and shared? Like I haven't been connected to the audience in a while. It's been hours since I posted something. That's difficult. And it's like, I don't wish that upon anybody. Like I don't want to be, watching Sing 2 with my kids and being like, oh, maybe it's like
I gotta check the box.
Yeah, let me check that box. Megan, my wife, Megs, we'll say like feed the beast. It's like she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, just feeding the beast, like
Yeah.
And that makes it sound like it's obligational. It's a box checking thing. Like I was on my own for 24 hours this week. I took a trip down to Las Vegas to go to this dinner. When I'm by myself and I'm like not, like I take plenty of time to just be present and be in the moment, but I'm also like doing 100% more, stories, selfie talk, talking head to the camera, engaging with people. Like my Instagram content went up by like, 300% in that time because I didn't feel this conflict of like, am I like taking something away from being with the people in my life?
I think it's a Gary Vaynerchuk video I saw, but the end point, the punchline was, in order to be selfless in this kind of a world, you have to be selfish. It's selfish, and selfish not only meaning like I've got to do the thing that makes money for the home, but it's also doing like I have to if you love what you do, and I'm making the assumption that you do, you have to do that, because if you're miserable in doing it, if you're not happy, like imagine you had a 9-to-5 job and you didn't love it, like a lot of people maybe who are listening to this do. When you come home, that lack of happiness spills over into the family. And I remember when I was married, me and my wife at the time would have this conversation, and I would always go with this, you think I'm being selfish right now. In my head, I'm being selfish so that I can come here and we can do fun things and I can be selfless and I can turn it off when I come home. But when I'm not doing that, I've got to be all in. And the same thing, I would find that crossover, right? Okay, well, I'm supposed to be selfless now with the family, but there's these opportunities, moments, emails, communications, things that I need to just like, I want a Zach Morris timeout. I want everyone to freeze, right? And I just want to go back to selfish mode and pump out that DM or whatever it may be. Or be like, oh yeah, I'll book that call.
Sure.
And it's very difficult, especially now when our lives that we've created businesses online, that monster is insatiable. And it's open 24/7, 365, and it's this fire, and it's like, oh shit, I haven't thrown any kindling in the fire in a while, any logs in it. I need this to keep burning.
Yeah.
But what I've found though too is it won't go out. The fire wouldn't go out. Like if you literally didn't make a fresh post, right? If you had Nate or someone just kind of reschedule a bunch of old posts that you made previously, nobody would probably know the difference that they are reruns for the most part, and it won't go out. And that's something that's taken me a while to figure out.
Yeah.
Like I did it with our newsletter. I built up a newsletter after I got YouTube took my entire channel down, like 750 videos
right.
gone.
I remember that.
And that's when I was like, I need another vertical. I need somewhere else in case anything were to ever happen. I at least have an audience built up on something that no one could take away from me, and an old school email list. So pumped out like 38 or whatever those weekly newsletters, and I stopped. And I've gone 10 weeks without creating one. In the first 3 weeks that I didn't do it, I knew I just didn't have the bandwidth with all this travel. It messed with my head. Like, I am letting people down. I'm a fail. And guess what? Nothing bad happened. And actually, in the 10 weeks that I haven't put out a newsletter, we've actually PR'd revenue in what I do. And I'm like, well, that's definitely not connected, but it's fucking interesting. But it's like I was so scared that the fire was going to go out.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not. You could take a complete sabbatical from content on one side, go do something else. But I feel like that's our golden handcuffs. They truly are golden. And these are champagne problems that we all have. Like if you have built a successful business online, but those are the handcuffs that you're shackled to. It's that's that scene from Wedding Crashers. Make me a bicycle, clown, right? Like entertain me. What have you done for me recently? What's new? Keep feeding my dopamine so I can live vicariously through you or get my hit as I go through my story Rolodex.
Yeah. I resonate with a lot of the things that you just shared and just sort of that idea of like, the difference between being selfish and selfless. And the story though, that I think we tell ourselves, and I guess speaking about both of us, I'll talk more about myself, but I think a lot of men in general, it's like, hey, I got to go and do this thing and provide, like this is my like, and to a certain degree, like, yeah, I've got to go and earn an income for a family. But my wife works and she earns a good living too.
What does your wife do?
She's a psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's got her own private practice. But it's like, that's a story I tell myself. And so like, this is what I got to go do. And really like what my wife continues to challenge me on, and I've learned so much, is like, if I believe like providing, and I had this as a child growing up, this sort of intuition is like, what do my kids want from their dad? Do they want like do they really care about the house, the this, the that, like the thing I'm providing, or do they just want, hugs, love, attention, care, empathy, like somebody who's just going to be emotionally available. And I get that like emotional availability doesn't like provide a roof over the head. Like it doesn't, but it is way more important to their life success than whatever opportunity I can pay for them to go get. And so that's the constant challenge that I think about all the time, is that I am hardwired and driven to go and do this thing. And that's how I think I'm serving the people in my life. And there's this very real possibility that it doesn't actually serve them that well, that it serves them better for me to be less focused on this and more available in these ways for them. So it becomes like, oh, well, maybe this is selfish in a way that's just purely selfish. Like
Sure.
I'm just out here because I love being a coach. I love training. I love creating programs. I love, building things. And like, that's what I'm just doing. And I'm doing it for me. And so when it comes time to be present for family, like I do need to learn how to shut that off, because it's really that's my time. That's my thing to do for myself. So I'm only learning, and I know it's going to be a long path of learning, and I don't want to get 5 more years, 10 more years down the road, which I know will happen, and look back and be like,
I wish,
like it's going to happen. Like I will absolutely look back in 10 years and be like, probably should have done it differently, but this is the best I can do now as a dad and as a business owner and as a coach and all those things.
I think about that. I think about the expense of fatherhood, and now the expense to me is the cute little things. They want snugs. Like if I play Play-Dohs with my daughter for 10 minutes, she won the lottery. She loves it. Not that it's so rare, but like in the moment, she is happier than anything. I've got a townhouse. The mailbox is down and around, and I've got an electric skateboard. And I'll just ride it down to the, down the street to the mailbox, letting her ride with me there and back. She goes insane. Like I've made her weak. As she gets older, she's going to want to go to that 2-week, $6,000 volleyball camp. She's going to want to go on that summer trip with her friends to whatever. Like, it's like now being a dad isn't monetarily as expensive. Like kids are expensive, but it's time and energy. And it's being silly. It's like taking me from like business brain to like getting down on all fours, and I'm pretending I'm a dog because we just got done watching Homeward Bound for the first time. Yeah. And she wants to play, role play or whatever.
Sure.
And so I'm like, okay, enjoy this now, because as she gets older, the expense changes. It's going to go from this experiential type of expense that's adorable, it looks great on camera, to, hey, Dad, I'm going to the movies with my friends. Can I have $20?
Yeah.
I need a car. Like it's
$20.
Yeah,
by the time she's going to movies on her own, it's going to be $40 for a ticket.
Yeah. If she's still going to the movies next when that happens.
She's just going to put on some goggles, and she's going to be with her friends in the meta at some movie. And she's going to be like, this is great.
You mentioned, so you're down in Vegas. And I saw you went in, you got to meet with Alex and Layla Hermosi and with their new venture, acquisition.com, and sit there. And so this dinner was for businesses that are doing $3 million or over and potentially could partner with acquisition if selected or however that works. And their goals, I think their tagline is 3 million to 30 or whatever their kind of thing is. How did Alex first get on your radar? Did you experience it when he was, obviously on mine from the gym launch, seeing the services they provided, the gyms, that's where it first hit.
Yep.
How did they first get on your radar?
Yeah, it goes back to the gym launch, probably in 2019 or 18 was when I first started to see like the ads pop up.
Did your gym ever utilize those services?
I investigated their services. This was when we already had like our individual design business, and we were really growing mostly our remote coaching individual design business, or like personal coaching business. And I was curious. I was like, I wonder if something about the gym launch model could support what we're doing, both in like the in-person, but just generally like, grow our individual design gym, but also maybe add customers to our remote coaching business. And so I went through like their sales pipeline and ended up not pulling the trigger on it, because I was like, hey, I don't think this is going to really suit what we're doing, because we weren't the type of gym specifically that they were like, I guess, had been working with,
Were you
up until that.
financially starving at that
We were
time?
not financially starving.
Then you were not the right gym for a gym launch model. That's exactly, and again, I joke around that 6-week challenge, I don't use it like using the word praise, but their ideal customer is someone who is physically starving, emotionally self-esteem starving. They want to lose that 20 pounds in 6 weeks. It's worth so much to them to do.
Yeah.
And it's just the inverse. The marketing is to the gym owner who's, I need $2,000 more, $20,000 more. I'm financially starving. And it's just very interesting when you look at the parallels of the two marketing plays there.
Yeah, got it. Anyhow, so they came on the radar at that point, but it was actually really, Ryan Fisher, who I've known for quite some time. We had met. I don't know exactly what year. It was 2017. He came here to do a podcast, and then we connected at the games later, a year later, and he came up here for another visit. He was coming through San Francisco, and he had just, I think we did I don't even know if we did a podcast. We just hung out. He was in Texas interviewing Alex at his home, and that's when he met him, and then he flew here. It was shortly thereafter he was here, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I was just down in Texas with this guy. His name's Alex. Really bright." I was like, "Cool." So I started really poking around and what's this guy about? What's he doing? And I think from that point forward, I was very, started following him on social media, just seeing whatever he's putting out. He didn't put out a ton of content, at that time. The content really seemed to pick up during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was just paying attention, and then when he really launched the YouTube channel in a bigger way to sort of start to provide the free, sort of business content, business education, entrepreneurship content, I really was just oh, I'm super intrigued, and then just been really tracking that a lot, and then recognizing that Layla played this really big role in their companies, and that she had her own perspective and point of view, which I was so pumped to learn about and follow her content. So that was just how that kind of unfolded.
I mentioned, I had Alex on the podcast twice. He was gracious to come back after I had a recording error. And it might be, with Alex, it's funny you mentioned the content kind of turning on in the pandemic. Alex was always, I think, very much a student of Dan Kennedy, direct sales marketing, direct sales response, type businesses, and those whole concept of branding and and putting yourself out there. I think I've heard him self-admittedly say yeah, I've kind of ignored a lot of that, and then realized how important. And there's such long tail ROI to this whole thing. It has been interesting. I'm glad he's been creating the content. I think a lot of the stuff he makes and he says is obviously it's helpful, and it's nice because it's very agnostic. Even that he's a great example, in my opinion, of someone who was so niched into a corner, and then was able to, within a couple of years of content, completely rebrand themselves, so they're no longer the gym saving people type scenario. And I think it's so hard. So many of us get pigeonholed in something. Some of us, all these little ecosystems that spun off from CrossFit, Kelly Starrett, NC Fit, Street Parking, any of these brands, in person, online, whatever, they all kind of, grew from this CrossFit sun and then spun off and they become their own solar system. Yeah. It's hard. You don't want to get pigeonholed. Part of me thinks, I was talking with Jim Kroll about this. I think that's one of the reasons Whoop wanted out of sponsorship of CrossFit. I think they, that might be one of the reasons that they don't want to get pigeonholed in this one specific niche type scenario. When you think of functional bodybuilding, I made the criticism the other day, CrossFit isn't, it's its own brand, but at the gym level, it's more of a genre. It's more of a genre in the fitness industry. Do you want to get functional bodybuilding to the level to where it is an understood genre? So when people are oh, I think they're doing functional bodybuilding, and to what that means, that comes with it, the consequences that there's going to be people ripping it off and calling it their own thing, and functional HIIT bodybuilding training and all these variations, which probably already exist.
Yeah, they do. A lot of them exist. I mean, it's certainly not there to the degree that CrossFit is there, but it's becoming more and more a genre. And, I think I started calling it functional bodybuilding in 2016 or 2017, right around that winter. When I looked up URLs, or not URLs, but I guess URLs, but also Instagram handles, there was one functional bodybuilding out there. It was and maybe another, I don't know, and they were quiet accounts. People weren't posting anything. It was like kind of like true bodybuilders that just like trained like with, better technique and
Sure.
full range, and maybe added in some plyometrics and some other things. And I was like, okay, cool. Like this has obviously been around for some time. People have been using this term, but it really hasn't caught on. And I think now you have seen tons of people come out of CrossFit who are like starving for some bodybuilding back in their life. And, NC Fit's got a bodybuilding kind of program. Ryan Fisher's got all of his programs that very much like bridge this gap.
Combine compound with isolation and the whole thing.
Yeah. I know like you're going to go down south and interview Lori Christine King, and she's got like the Paragon training method. Like they've got plenty of bodybuilding stuff in there. It's like, it's just, I've seen stuff in HWPO. It's like, looks like just functional bodybuilding. And so I think it's really happening. And yeah, I guess the consequences that like, okay, there's going to be all these different options for people. I think it's good.
It's a great thing. Yeah.
I think that you're going to start seeing more. We're seeing it happen already, but like the model of what the gyms look like, the Globo gyms, even the micro gyms, it's like you got to have a little bit of both. You got to have a functional area and some machines and some bodybuilding stuff. That's what they want. No one's cracked the code on like how to deliver that in a cost-effective way that works with like, the operational costs of like the space. But it's like you've been in the gym where you're like, man, this place has turf. It's got a badass like rig, and it's got all these sick machines, and it's got all this stuff. Like I want to be at that gym. Like obviously that's what we built here. Like this is the playground. Like do I wish I had another 2,000 square feet to just stack a bunch of other cool bodybuilding equipment and functional? Yeah, I wish I did. Like it's a playground.
I was thinking about it literally on the Uber over here is about the genre with functional bodybuilding. So you couldn't get functional bodybuilding oneword.com. That was already gone. You guys got the hyphen, right?
That's right.
Did you guys try to buy it at any point or like reach out?
I can't recall if we did. I'm sure we did at some point. And it might have just been like, oh, that's pretty expensive.
Like when you say there was no handles that had been taken, like in my head, it's like, that's like one of those ideas. Like I always joke around with people like, I've got $1 million idea that I just selfishly want black chalk. Black chalk so the gyms don't look dirty as much anymore. Someone please come up with black chalk tomorrow. Take it, $1 million idea. It's just one of those dumb moments where you're like, why the fuck didn't I think of that? Like functional bodybuilding for like 2 words that just like, oh my God, just like the SEO factor alone is just incredible. But when I think of like, we talk about genres, like do you want functional bodybuilding to become a genre? Yes, but it's like, but we have our own recipe of this specific genre. Yeah. And with all the ripoffs, and again, I don't mean that in a negative way, but it just, again, when you have a great idea, it's going to have spinoffs. That's just the natural process. You want, no matter what, everyone like, oh, that's like Marcus's functional stash. Like you want that, which is bodybuilding doesn't have that. Bodybuilding's a genre. No one's like, oh, that bodybuilding? Yeah, but that's not like bodybuild, like it's not, there's no attached thing because it truly just always stayed a genre. Yeah. But now with the internet, CrossFit is a genre, but it can be tied back to a very specific fitness methodology. When we think about functional bodybuilding, is that kind of how, okay, that's fine. People are going to make their own version of what I've created and what I've kind of, spun off here. But I want it to always get pointed back like, oh, but that's like what they do, what Marcus does.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of our conversations internally. It's like, yeah, let's get more people are going to start doing this, and we just want to basically, like, as much as we can, own this category.
Be the sun that those planets orbit around.
I think it's going to it's forcing me to, like, really think, we have a way of doing it, but that needs to evolve too, because, once upon a time, it was like people wanted CrossFit with a little dose of bodybuilding. And now it's like, we want bodybuilding with a little dose of CrossFit. Like, this is sort of, the pendulum is shifting. I mean, I'm going to stay committed to, like, well, it's really a hybrid of both that makes people feel good when they train, feel functional. We can talk about what that means, but just like, I can use my body the way I want to use it, and I can do cool stuff. And but I also look jacked. I look good,
Yeah.
and that's it. And so there are clearly training principles that really allow you to look good and get the most out of resistance training so you can look jacked. I don't know. I was scrolling through Instagram last night. I heard you a clip that you had up there. It was like, those years that you spent just like doing everything in your power to get better at overhead squats so that you could snatch better. And your like takeaway was like, this, I never thought once that like an overhead squat and a snatch was going to get me jacked. I just knew it was like the way to get a better snatch. And that's true. It's like, if you want to get bigger legs, if you want to build good shoulders, like we've got these methods that are much safer and more approachable so that you can push the intensity required to build your shoulders and build your legs.
Yeah.
But if you like the idea of snatching because it's fun, explosive, challenging, like it makes you feel accomplished, like, which I do, like, then here's how we can approach doing that in a way that's not going to just like punish you forever and ever and ever and make you have to go to, a dry needling appointment 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And we'll be honest, like maybe you shouldn't even be snatching, but we can do this kettlebell flow and this kettlebell snatch work, and we can do this other, or we can teach you how to clean, or we can teach you how to do, something else, or we can learn things like gymnastics movements that are a little bit higher skill that are not going to pay off huge and build massive quads. Like you learning a pistol progression is not the way to get, quad sweeps. Like let's go do something else. But if you love that, and a lot of people do, and they want to have something that like keeps them engaged and challenged and feeling the variety, like that was what people, I do believe, loved about CrossFit, was the variation. That was like, it just gave them something that challenged them. But the moment they spent 40 minutes of their precious 60, a day trying to like improve a skill and not get a pump and not get like sweaty, they were like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to just do PVC pipe snatches for 30 minutes. Like I got 60 minutes to go in and feel fit. Like give me 45 minutes of sweat, of resistance, and let me sprinkle in something that's, different and challenging and, makes my brain actually like have to work.
Now that I get to sit on the sidelines of someone else's CrossFit gym, and I do open gym and I watch, I'm able to see through a lot of going back to it, I don't think there's anyone in the group fitness setting that's like, snatching is great because it's explosive and powerful. And even if they're an ex-collegiate athlete, I don't know if that's always the thing that does it. I think early on, it was weird looking. No one else was doing it. And even if I just did it with a 10, I did 65 pounds on the bar and I had a video where I was able to show someone, I'm in a freak category. Like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah. I've never seen that. A muscle up. Even if you had this really shitty one that you would never, like my first muscle up, I would never have aired. Nobody would ever publish that video if that's what theirs looked like. But back then I showed everybody my BlackBerry video, right? Because I was a freak in 2006. But now I look at those movements like snatching. Why does one in a group fitness setting want to get better at snatching overhead squat? It is social currency for that immediate population. Yeah. If you can snatch whatever better, you are cooler, you are looked at. And it's one moment in time that you're not a square in a Zoom call. You're not just the dad at home and the husband. Like you're somebody for a second in a moment in time. Like, oh, that's Ben. Ben's got a fucking killer snatch. Yeah. The guy kills it. And everyone, on snatch day wants to see what Ben's going to do, that type of thing. But the thing that's always funny is I'll walk around the gym and I'm working out and, shirt off or whatever. The real social currency, when we really boil down to it, for being in the gym is how you look, right? How you look is ultimately the social currency that exists. And just basic, what any fitness professional would know, we're not going to look better with the snatching and overhead squatting. Yeah. So like, would you really, for that one workout a week that is a snatching overhead squat, Ben, would you rather be the man then? Would you rather just look like the man fucking every day of the fucking week, and then overhead squat might be sacrificed in the process? Sure.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of how I like started approaching program design, even like in the last 3 years that I was like programming at my CrossFit affiliate before I sold it, was like, what are the movements that people need to be doing? How do I pack more work into an hour for people? This idea of like, the whiteboard says we're doing 21, 15, 9, and that's it today.
45 reps is not enough volume.
Yeah. So yeah, and And there was pushback from people who were like, when are we going to do this snatch? When are we going to do this? Like, when are we going to do the benchmark workouts? And I'm like, you know, I know it's like hard to shift that mentality because that's what brought you in. That was what gave you like the first initial buzz. But you came here because you wanted to like look better, feel better, like have good energy. And, you know, I'm more and more confident than I ever have been that doing these like skills, these higher skill lifts, like is not what's going to get you there. And it's definitely not going to get like 90% of my members there who don't have any business doing that right now and really have no desire to like put in the time and energy to acquire the skill to do it in a way that could, you know, like, hey, look at Olympic weightlifters. Like they're pretty jacked, you know, many of them look phenomenal and I wouldn't mind having those physiques, but that's, you know, a lifetime of doing lifting, and predominantly the body composition changes that they're experiencing are coming from heavy ass squats and heavy ass pulls, which we can do. We can go squat and we can go do deadlifts, and you know, we don't have to do the snatch to like build big legs and you know, a strong upper back.
Do you get a lot of people reaching out to you saying, I'm switching over my group programming model to more functional bodybuilding? I am getting the feedback. Why aren't we doing more kipping handstand push-ups? Why haven't there been any more 3-minute Frans? Those kind of things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't get I don't get the people asking like, hey, I'm getting pushback on these things.
How do I handle it?
Yeah, so much anymore. I do get the feedback. It's been a couple of years since the heavy swing of that came in, which was like, hey, you know, we're switching over to more of a functional bodybuilding. You know, how can I learn from you about how to do this better? Which sent me down the rabbit hole of like, okay, how can I create like an education system for people and like get them doing our method and our functional bodybuilding programming. But now it's just like a lot of people want to go that route, and I don't know that they're running into the challenge of like people demanding like the 3-minute, you know, high intensity workouts and the high skilled movements, because they're just like, maybe a lot of those people turned out already, or they're gone. Like they just have a whole new audience of people that are coming in that are like, I don't know anything about all that stuff.
Yeah,
like,
they're fresh. They're unicorns. You can paint the canvas for them.
Totally.
That's something I've done a ton of, especially when I did it, when I went from CrossFit South End, gutted that operating system and got rid of CrossFit, installed our group tempo training model. That was, you know, 40 plus people overnight, just boom, and then a heavy trickle effect afterwards. So I'll get that question is, how do I deal with something like I found a new unique belief in fitness that I like. I want to replace my old one. However, that's what I've been serving everybody. And I always relate it back to fitness and fashion. There's some similarities. And what you can learn from fitness and fashion, Jinko jeans. Do you remember Jinko jeans?
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely. None of us, even prior to Jinko jeans.
I always wanted a pair of those, but they were like too aggressive. And I was like, my mom would like,
absolutely not.
Let's get something else.
No, yeah, Jinko jeans and a chain wallet and the whole deal. If any of you guys aren't familiar with Jinko jeans, just go ahead and Google that real quick. But that was fashion, and it wasn't around until it was. But the thing that made it present was the volume of people doing it. So I always look at, like, even now, like, go back 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, would we be wearing 5-inch inseams? No. Not as much. Nope. Remember, basketball, you'd wear the basketball shorts, you know, right over the middle of the kneecap to even below the kneecap. Yep. So if you want your new fitness, new unique belief in fitness to take hold, it's about volume. Because nobody, just like in fashion, nobody follows a trend unless they see other people doing it.
Yeah.
And unless they can perceive that person as, oh, they look good in that.
Yes.
And a lot of people are doing it, I'm going to do it next. So I'll always try to, you know, at a broad level, try to coach people, like, we need the mavens in the gym, people that are the influencers, to really fall in love with your unique belief in fitness. If they don't do it, you've got a big struggle on your hands.
Yeah.
But if you can, it's going to be like fashion. It's going to be like one of these things where people are like, oh, that's kind of weird, but kind of cool. And they look good doing it. And then it's a psychological, just boom, one by one, they just kind of all follow in. But I always think about that, trying to change the tides inside of a gym when they're changing their unique belief in fitness and switching over. You just got to think of it as how fashion trends come and go. It all results in, can I get a volume of people doing it, and can I make those people look good or be perceived to look good in this new style?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting, and to watch the evolution of what we do in the group fitness setting, it has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it, and we talked about it at dinner last night. I really think this online thing, though, is is truly what a lot of brick and mortar gyms are going to experience quote unquote problems with, because they have their one set way of doing it. So it's one recipe for everyone. I mean, think of the idea of creating a workout for 25 people is somewhat insane. It'd be like me, hey Marcus, 26 people are coming over to the house. You and Megs, can you make a meal? And you'd be like, whoa, what are they allergic to? What do they like? What did they eat yesterday? All the things, right?
Sure.
I'm going to make this meal. 20% are going to hate it. 20% are going to say it's the best thing ever. 60% are going to be like, it's okay.
Right.
I'll eat it, when I think about functional bodybuilding and it's, from a business perspective, do you guys see the infiltration, or do you guys believe that your product infiltrates brick and mortar at some point, and that if we keep doing this, the natural evolution is that people are going to go to their brick and mortar gym and say, do more of this stuff? Are we going to start getting emails of people like, hey, I'm getting enough requests about your shit. Like, how can I install it in my thing? Like, do you see that being a growth vector, or do you believe those people just leave the gym because they're not going to be able to convince that owner to adjust and, adopt a new unique belief in fitness?
Well, I mean, even if a gym owner is going to adopt this method of training, like, they still have to answer that question. How do I write a workout that's good for everybody? Whether you're doing CrossFit workout or you're doing, this Orange Theory workout, it's just the workout that everyone's doing. Are there certain approaches to training that are more suitable for, you're going to hit, rather than just having 20% of the people love it, you might have 50% of the people love it, and then 30% are going to be satisfied. And how do we shift some of those percentages? So the challenge would still be there for functional bodybuilding. It's still there for us. It's we deliver an online training program. We have a lot of people that do it. It doesn't hit the mark for everybody. It hits the mark for this percentage really well. And how do we continue to expand how well it reaches, this audience? What we have over a brick and mortar gym is that we just have a bigger audience, a bigger distribution channel. We're not just serving a local audience. We fortunately can serve the worldwide audience, anybody that's got an internet, and that's allowed us to grow, to bigger heights than we could have ever with just our
Sure.
ID gym. So it's really about, for the brick and mortar gyms, the owners there, and for us, and what we're really committed to is we got to teach our customers as we go. I see the content that you put out on programming, on tempo training, and it's there's always this is how I'm doing it, this is why I'm doing it, and these are here are some of the core principles, and then somebody can go and make it their own, right? And that's really what needs to be happening in these gyms for them to kind of win this battle of someone comes in, they're I'm not really feeling that. It's okay, well, here's how you can adapt it.
Empower and allow autonomy in the program.
Yeah, precisely. People, I think, still value having a structure, and a structure that's not hey, on Monday we're doing intense Fran, and on Tuesday we're doing a 5x5, and on Wednesday, no, it's the structure is you come in, you prep your body, you do something that's somewhat heavy and compound, then you do some accessory work, isolation work, and then you condition, or you show them 3 formats for how to do that differently that incorporate just the principles of hypertrophy, range of motion, speed and power, and aerobic energy system work. You show them how to do that, and they see it enough ways that they're okay, that's the workout today, but I'm gonna adapt it this way, or that's the workout today, but that's the performance workout today, but I'm gonna do more of the body comp workout today. And they have options that are not today I'm gonna go do yoga, tomorrow I'm gonna go do this, tomorrow I'm gonna do that are not connected. There's no, look, and that's not to say someone can't choose fitness like that. Hey, get moving. Great. I did yoga today. I went for a hike tomorrow. Lifted weight the next day. It's if that's working for you, awesome. If someone's following a training program because they want to actually have some measurable results, or they're looking to, build muscle mass, or they want something that's consistent. It's then lay out a path for them to do that, where within that path, they can maybe choose a different bias that doesn't take them completely out into something different that keeps them seeing, results, overloading, getting better in a particular method. And that's what I want people to see with functional bodybuilding. And that's why I love the term, and how I said, like, we evolved from people wanted CrossFit with a little bit of bodybuilding. Now they want bodybuilding with a little bit of CrossFit. It's like, I'm using those terms because we can discuss them, but that's kind of what our program track options look like in functional bodybuilding. We've got perform, we've got pump, we've got pillars. And so when someone signs up, it's like, well, what are you feeling like? They answer some questions like, I really want to look good. It's like, go to pump. Pump is where to be. Like, you're going to hit these movements. You're going to hit them in this way. We're going to get a little bit of like, functional conditioning mixed in there. That's going to build in some accessory work. It's going to get your heart pumping. It's going to get you to, maybe swing a kettlebell, but like, you're doing this. It's like someone comes in like, hey, I love CrossFit. I'm just feeling a little beat up and I just want to slow things down, like kind of heal some stuff. Like, hey, come and do perform. Like, you're going to see a power snatch. You're going to see a clean. You're going to see a muscle up potentially. You might have a workout with kipping toes to bar, but we're also going to be doing Cossack squats. We're going to be doing ATG split squats. We're going to be doing, unilateral single arm dumbbell bench press. We're going to be doing like these other movements that are probably going to feel new to you.
Sure.
And they're going to have a great balance to that. So that to me is like, that's the ultimate model, for how I'd want somebody to be able to come into a gym and just be like, yeah, sweet. Like, I do functional bodybuilding, but today I'm feeling this, and that's what I'm gonna choose this option. And I know enough to know that like we're doing, a superset. The workout, today's workout, the FBB workout of the day says we're doing a superset of clean grip deadlift with a strict bar dip. And we're going to do them every minute on the minute. We're going to alternate. We're going to do, 6 to 8 reps of each at this tempo. And you know what? Like, I'm just not feeling dips today. Like, my shoulder's a little wonky. So I'm just going to go do a strict press, with the dumbbell. And I know enough to know that that's what I got to do. And they just do it. And the coach is like, hell yeah, that's great. It's like, I don't need to like scale it for you. I don't need to like tell you like, hey, my shoulder's feeling a little weird on the dip. It's like, oh yeah, just go do some sit-ups. It's like, what the, that's totally not what we're, you're struggling to get into a dip position today, but like you can press fine. Like, let's press. Let's keep it a similar movement pattern. Let's keep the intention of this training the same. So that would be kind of, how I think functional bodybuilding and how I would want to teach people over time. It's like, how do you deliver functional bodybuilding in a body composition focused, like hypertrophy format? How do you deliver functional bodybuilding, in a performance-based setting where people who want to do a little bit more functional training can, but they're not going to just trash their body? This is how it looks. Teach gyms how to do that. And then they can either deliver their own programs, or they can just deliver our programs and know how to coach people and know how to basically guide those customers to the right fit for them on any given day. And it's okay that everyone's not doing the same thing. We talked about this last night. It's like, the camaraderie and that feeling of like that bond that people felt, I think got associated with like, we feel this because we're all doing the same exact thing in the gym. And I just always pushed back against that because I was like, I felt bonded to people and connected to people in the gym when we weren't doing the same workout at all. Yeah, it was nice to like, do an AMRAP with somebody and we were all 10 people doing the same 10-minute AMRAP, and that was cool. But like, I trained for years where I had like, buddies at the gym and I was high-fiving people and I would like, say, hey, nice lift. And we weren't doing the same thing. And especially during like competitive CrossFit days when we'd go to training camps at OPEX, like we were all doing different stuff, but we were all, super excited to be in the same room and, feeling inspired and like, I'm going to push myself, because that person's just looking at me. Like they're not doing the same exercise. So anyhow, that's sort of my take on like how FBB could infiltrate brick and mortar. But there's a lot of steps that have to happen to like educate the consumer and not just be like, oh, you know what? We're not doing this workout anymore. We're doing the functional bodybuilding workout, and there it is. And everyone get in line. It's like, you're going to run up against the same issues. Yeah. People are going to probably feel maybe a little bit better. My argument would be that they'd feel better, they might look better doing this, and that might just quiet some of the, complaints. It's like, oh, I look jacked. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna keep doing this.
And that process we know takes so long, and I think that's it. The changeover for a gym owner from one program to the other at the macro level is so abrupt to the customer, whereas the results of the benefits that won't be experienced anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
The abrupt volatility of like, whoa, we were eating burritos and now I'm eating hot dogs. That's like you switched the menu on me without even, without really a heads up. And I've always just found the only way to do it is you got to plan ahead of time. Like if you just decided today, listening to this podcast, you want to switch to functional bodybuilding, I tell you, cool, set yourself up on like a 6 to 12 month plan to slowly, let's use the word, brainwash the customer. You brainwashed them when they first came in. They never in their life thought they're going to take their hands this wide and hold a barbell. So you were able to exhibit influence previously. You can do it again. It's a steady drip of changing their minds.
Yeah.
I always tell the story like when I was over barbells dropping in the gym. I was over it.
Yeah.
From a sales perspective, I was having such a hard time doing tours and selling prospects. Crashing. And then
God, I remember those too. It's like, yeah, don't worry, you're not gonna be doing
don't worry
that
about
on your
that.
first day.
Yeah.
Like,
Don't worry about this crazy abrupt 400
my
decibel
God.
shit show that's happening right
it's
now.
the tours and like the new prospect is like,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, just.
It's like if you
look
ever
over
taken
here.
someone to a gun range for the first time, and just like every pop is just like it because they're not used to it, and it's very. I mean, they can't focus on being in a buying customer mindset at that point.
No.
Their adrenaline's up, fight or flight's maybe kicking in. It's a whole thing. But we were like, okay, guys, I don't want them dropping it because of a business reason. But I also believe that a lot of them are dropping a 95-pound barbell when they can clearly get 225 pounds over their head, and they're doing it just so they can go faster. And I think it's fucking obnoxious. So install this eccentric fucking requirement for the next 12 weeks, guys. And because I believe that if we eccentrically lower the barbell back down to our shoulder over the course of X amount of seconds, we're going to see improvements in our pull-ups as well, right? I think I can translate that over and retest pull. So like it just slowly educate me, like, oh yeah, that worked. Okay. And then it's just breaking little beliefs left and right kind of scenario. But to get to the business of what you've done, and we talked about you went to the Hermosi thing. So do you mind talking numbers? I mean, obviously you guys are doing, 3 million or over to be able to get invited by Hermosi to come sit at that dinner. Do you mind sharing?
They didn't ask for P&L.
No.
At least.
So they just took it on your word?
They took it
on your word.
Yeah, they took it on our word. Yeah. So
how are you guys doing? Like, what are you guys doing in revenue annually as again a small bit, technically a small business?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I can give you kind of. We have different business lines for sure. All of it's functional bodybuilding. We have a individual coaching service that we offer, so that's kind of the higher ticket, product that we have, and then we have like our group coaching online subscription, so people pay for a smaller.
So one to one to many.
One to many. $39 a month for one to many, and somewhere in the $350 per month range for the one to one. And this year, so I would say sometime in the pandemic, we like really shifted our model. We went to the subscription model. Prior to that, we ran quarterly launches of one group program that we had. We had this thing called Awaken Training Series. Yeah. And
so you launch like PIFs for everyone listening. This would be like you sold this 1, 6, 12, 18, however long week program, send someone a PDF, and it was these big pops of cash, but not recurring monthly revenue.
Precisely. Yeah. Which was what grew our business initially, and we got quite a bit of reach. I think through that whole period of time, we probably put over 6,000, 7,000 people through Awaken Training Series, and there were multiple offers in there. So there was like ATS 1, 2, 3, 4, and so people that there was always some attrition. Like we'd get 1,000 customers into one, 60% of them would go on to 2, 60% would go on to 3, 60% of those would go on to 4. But we were for 3 years, we were putting people into ATS 1, at increasing launch rates. I think for 2 full years, we were just growing. And then that leveled and it started to decline, like the new people coming in. We had saturated kind of our market. They had seen it and they were like, well, what's next from you? And we weren't really sure how to transition. So we wanted to move into like I wanted to move into a subscription model because these hits of revenue every 3 months were really exhausting on the team, particularly my partner Satya and me in the interim. It was also, volatile and emotionally. It was like, okay, we're up, and then okay, what's going on in between? Is this going to be back up? And like, it just felt insecure as a company, as a business. So yeah, that was like, at our height, I think we probably in our best year during ATS, we did like maybe 2 million in revenue as a company, and that was with the individual coaching revenue like all lumped in there to maybe 2.4, and then that started to quiet down, and then the pandemic hit, and our program that we were offering was very gym focused. It was like you needed to have access to a gym to do ATS, and it did not. It wouldn't sell during the pandemic when there were like hardcore lockdowns for the first several months. Our pandemic lockdowns March 16th, April 1st was our launch date for ATS. Did not do well, and it was like, okay, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna pivot? Okay, let's put out tons of free resources. Let's put out tons of like, here's how you can train at home. Here's how you can do functional bodybuilding at home. And it was like this educational manual that we put out that was like 30 pages long. Like, these are the pieces of equipment. This is where you could probably find them on Amazon. This is what you can do. These are the things you want to keep in mind. Like, don't just go do burpees until you're blue in the face. Like, add in some tempo, add in these principles. Like, this is what you can do. And here's some home workouts that you can try. And then people were like, great. Tons of people use that. We're like using the resources. A month and a half later, here's this new program. It's called Minimalist. Persist Minimalist. You're going to persist through this pandemic with nothing, with dumbbells, with bands, with body weight. It's free for a month. Deliver it through True Coach. Join. Okay. Then that turned into paid. Once people were like, well, we're done with the month and we're still in lockdowns. Like, we still need this. And so those started to get paid. And then...
Do you have it set up as auto-enroll in the pay? So put in credit card, nothing charged now, and after 30 days, you're just going to get dinged until you cancel?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then about 2-3 months later, some gyms started to open. Hey, we offer a new training track that's like basically kind of like in what ATS used to be, but now offered as Persist. It's like, here's a training with barbells and with boxes and with rowers and stuff like that. So people had an option for minimalist or classic. It's like these two different options. Anyhow, that was when we kind of did away with ATS. It like slowly started to quiet down, and then we started to build Persist, and then that's where we are at today. And I think in 2021 was like even 2020 was the first year that we eclipsed that 3 million in revenue mark. So we went from like things were like at best, just above 2 with ATS. They started to decline, and then they more or less bottomed out. And it was like we still had revenue from our individual coaching because we had about 350 clients in that part of our business. But that even took a hit during the pandemic. A lot of people were like, hey, I got to put this on hold. Like, I can't, I might lose my job. Like, I don't know if I'm on furlough right now. I can't pay for this. So things were rocky. But then, that second half of 2021 was pretty successful in terms of like building a subscription base. I think maybe by the end of 2021, 2020, excuse me, at the end of 2020, we may have had like, 1,500 people, 2,000 people getting into that.
Yeah.
And then 2021 was all about, okay, how do we grow this? And so we've gone, we probably grew by like 40 or 50% in that year. And then in 2022, continuing some growth. So, I think what we looked at was like from pre-pandemic to today, I think we've had like 100% growth in revenue, but just, a complete pivot in our business from one model of sales to a totally different model of, servicing our customers, which ultimately feels much better to me. It's like, because the program and the delivery of the method is like, it's living and breathing. It's not like this program that I built that I'm just, selling every quarter. It's like we're adapting it. It's evolving. We're adding new features. We're adding, new resources for people all the time. We're doing the very best that we can to listen to the customer and get actual as much data as possible to be like, okay, that they want this in the program, let's put it in, versus like every 12 weeks we have, a growth in sales or a decline in sales, and that's the only data that we have. It's like, we're not like, what do I do with that?
It's interesting. So, Marcus is essentially talking about the two revenue models, especially for the brick and mortar. You have the PIF and the EFT, right? With yours, and some people, and I made the mistake too, and I know better. When I first created Microgym University, which again is just, it's an online business, I created it the entire, it took me 18 months, created the whole damn thing, sold it at one high tick, $6,000 for full enrollment. You get all the shit. And it was great. It was big punch. And as soon as it happens, you celebrate, you pop the champagne, and you're like, fuck, I got to start working on the new courses. Because this, it's going to take them X amount of time to make it through this content. And then they're going to be asking, what's next, sir?
Yep.
Right? So that PIF model is great. I think a lot of people look at that because during the pandemic, I had a lot of clients who went from brick and mortars. And this is when they realized there are their ways, signing leases that cost 30 to 40% of their total monthly revenue was not sustainable, especially, in something like a pandemic. So they transferred online. It was like, well, what do I do? Do I do 8-week PDFs and I sell like that? And I think a lot of people had seen what you had done with ATS. And my thing was, it is just a lot of stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, versus a EFT model, the recurring subscription, is you're just constantly having to drip that new stuff out at a nice steady pace. But then you can also count on the revenue coming in at a nice steady pace as well.
Yep.
It's, I talk a lot about, we were talking last time, one of my favorite books was Company of One by Paul Jarvis, that made me realize, okay, I want this one thing as my business. I want these other things as jobs. That if I don't do the work, nothing happens and it dies with me, right? If I stop doing the work. Do you look at, like, with functional bodybuilding, if I tied you up and left you up here and you couldn't make a video or do anything for 90 days, what happens? How much of the business is so propped up on you, Marcus, to where part of you is like, I still have a job. Like, if I don't dance, this shit don't happen. Versus the business, which in the definitions, I guess, operationally I use for that, which I probably should have stated, was I look at the business as something that you can step away from. You're still never fully removed, but you step away from, and the cogs in the machines move, the revenue's made, decisions are made, things like that, versus the job. Like, I actually have to be in there making the widgets, styling the hair, training the session, shooting the videos, whatever it may be, in order for the machine to keep going. I stop, there is an abrupt halt or a significant decrease in any KPI you could imagine you'd want to measure for your business.
Right. Yeah, I would well, I don't know how to assign like a value to that. I'll just talk generally in terms of, like, if I were to step away, let's say I just was like, hey, something big came up in the family. I just cannot be present for the next 30 days, 60 days. I think we would weather it. And not because, like, what I'm doing isn't valuable, but because there's a lot of, like, systems and processes in place to, like, keep the key public facing things going. There's
Keep feeding the beast.
Yeah. Like, we have content that we can repurpose.
Yep.
And they're, the programs probably are the hardest thing. It's like we have a big membership, and there are programs that I write, and I just wrapped up writing, like, the next 6 weeks of training that begins on August 15th. So August 15th, I've got 6 weeks of training planned, which takes us into
October won't make, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so
you're good till October, but then you're gonna have to have the next 6 weeks ready to go.
Yeah. And to get the next 6 weeks ready to go, by October, that process starts by August 15th.
Sure.
And there's people involved. There's a group of 20 people that are giving us, or 30 people that are giving us feedback on that cycle. They're 4 weeks ahead, and they're telling us what's going on with their training and where we're missing the mark. And, that's the big piece that I certainly still contribute a lot. It's like the sort of the innovation and the evolution of the training. But what's been not, like, it hasn't been like a goal of mine to I want to train a team to be able to do this job so I don't have to do it. It's like I want to build a team of coaches around me that could step in and really take over at least the group subscription programming should it be a requirement. And that's something that like takes time to document and to really think about. It's been like, one of my objectives this year, that I've listed in my OKRs. It's like, I've got to document what it takes to write functional bodybuilding training with the lens and the brain power that I put into it.
Like audio recording yourself as you're writing the programs, like making
I have these notes on my computer called like, these are persist rules. Like when we write this training, this is what we follow. We don't do this. Like we do this. Like never put this here. Like the 100 things that go through my head as I evaluate whether I have whether this design that I've put together is going to work for a lot of people, for thousands of people. That needs to be something that, so worst case scenario, like we could probably, recycle training. We could, one of my coaches, I'm sure, probably several of them, if tasked and of course compensated well for it. It's like, hey, come in, like Marcus is out, like here's pump, pillars, perform, these 3 training tracks. Like we need the next 6 weeks of training. And, they're super knowledgeable. We've trained them well. They understand the method. Many of them do the method all the time, and they could, take that and build a foundation on it for the next training cycle. But it would be, it'd be a big, it's a lot of work that would be new to them. And then I guess the other part was just like, my position in the company is driving the culture of what we're doing. It's like there's, aside from Satya, who you got to meet and have dinner with last night, there's not another single person who's like, this is where we're driving the culture of functional bodybuilding. Like it's coming from me, and that's where it should be coming from. So if that's absent for a long time, I think a lot of people, employees, coaches start to like raise their hand, like, where are we going? What are we doing? Like, what's the North Star of the company? And that can't come from anybody else. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, what the percentage of like, business in a job, but there's definitely a job that I've got, and there's things that I got to check off, and I have my jobs in the company, but then there's also this business that we're running that, thankfully I have great people around me. And I think Satya is probably, this conversation would be very different if she wasn't around. I'd be like, yeah, I got a job.
Satya's great. She's being very ninja-like down there working out right now.
Yeah.
I can hear her breathing between sets. But that's exactly why we mentioned earlier, man, it's showing people the behind the scenes of my family life is something that the audience thinks about. They wonder, like, man, I wonder what happens. How does does Marcus's wife argue at dinner about his content? Like, that's what they're thinking in their head.
Yeah.
The same way they're thinking, you sit here in a glass functional bodybuilding tower and you're working out, whatever. And I like to bring the light that even a business doing over $3 million a year has an org chart of essentially Marcus, who sits at a CEO role, a program design role, and on-camera talent. Like, I mean, would we say those like the majority kind of big 3 roles you're playing?
Yeah.
And then you have Satya, who's your chief marketing officer, and she's making sure that we're getting enough eyeballs on things and evaluating that whole process and helping you think of the business so you can bounce ideas off of. If you got Nate over here who's an animal on the editing and the videography, but like, this is a high revenue business for everyone listening to this in the gym owner world. This is still 3 million would still put in like the small business category in the general prospect of business operations and revenue. But beyond the 3 of you and those names I just had, you've got Cliff, who I haven't met Cliff yet. What's Cliff's role?
I mean, Cliff's title is director of operations, and I think he oversees the individual coaching business, like the coaches, and also basically he's like heads up the customer success team for our online subscription, making sure that programs are there, delivered on time, managing all customer inquiries and issues that come up with getting onto our training platform, True Coach.
Sure.
Those types of experiences that people are having. and he's just been an absolute, game changer for us when it comes to like documenting process within the company. He's kind of our he's our HR department too. So he's taken a pretty big heavy lift on all those things. Then Satya's got Delaney working underneath her as like a junior marketer. So she's got support on marketing side. And then we have like kind of our head, admin, Molly, who's been with us since before, lockdown. She was helping out on the on-site business when we were doing that still. And then we have somebody who's doing sales, for the individual coaching. It's like getting on calls with prospects and basically selling them on, a year-long commitment to personal coaching with one of our coaches. And so that's like our team of, employees. And
how many people would you say that is? Like full-time?
That's
full
7.
Focus?
I think I just named 7 people, or we just named 7 people. Those are like 7 full-time employees. And then there's 7 coaches on top of that. Those coaches are also all full-time.
Got it.
We kind of defined full-time as like once you have 40 clients or more, you're full-time for the company.
Sure. Yeah. I've always used a term when my first client taught it to me when I first started doing consulting in 2015. He referred to it as full focus, meaning like, I don't really know how many hours of the week you're going to work in this business. It could be a fuck time, but as long as this is like your sole focus, your only means of income for the most part kind of scenario.
Yeah. So those are, we've got those, basically 13 people, 14 people that are full focus. And then we have, a list of contractors that we outsource some things to from graphics to like editing help that Nate will get. We have an advisor that's sort of helping us on, business vision and
Jim.
Yeah. Jim. I'm trying to think who else is, who else gets the 1099.
You think about it though, like, if everyone's like, just follow along with the math, it's like you and me were talking and I asked you what was a big takeaway from your dinner with Layla and Alex, and I know you got to converse mainly a lot with Layla. So I think you should, you need to get like a growth-minded CEO, someone to step in or someone that, help drive that focus. And it's like, well, the margins just we don't for the person we want, we probably maybe don't have the compensation package ready for that person yet, but that could be on our trajectory. But just to put it in like context for everyone listening, like even with multiple millions of dollars in revenue, having this size of a team and all that, like things change. And this is the online scene, guys. So I mean, an online business, I'd be curious what yours is like. Is going to run profit margins. I'm sorry, in the exceptional numbers compared to a gym is high fiving itself if it's doing 22-25%. You know. Online, we can see 50s and 60s, and depending on how lean you run it. And that kind of goes back to like company one was like this idea of like, do I want to make $1 million? Yes. Do I want to spend $900,000 to make $1 million? No. So how do I manipulate the business to run it as lean as possible, which generally means less humans, unfortunately. Like that's, the number one thing is going to be your HR. It's the hardest thing. It's the most complicated because humans are fickle people, and you fall in love with them and their skill set, and for whatever reason, life takes them away from you. For whatever reason, their decision, your decision, and now you're trying to find a needle in a haystack again. Another great replacement. It's very hard, and they're most expensive. Yeah. It's very difficult. But
and that's how we ran our company. I mean, that's it's not like these were not. I use words like this is how we run our company. Like these weren't like intentional choices. This was just like. This is how it went. This is what happened. Satya introduced herself to me. We teamed up on a project. It was successful. We did it again. We just the two of us. And there were coaches that were coaching clients on the side.
Serendipity probably is the initiator. Yeah. And then just being in the trenches together.
Yeah. And then it was like we felt really constrained at some point on something. So we're like, okay, we'll hire this person. And it was like, oh, really? Like we'll do it. We'll bite the bullet and we'll just hire a media person, like someone to come in and shoot video photography, and that was kind of like it. It's like, okay, there's 3 of us running this new thing. And then it was, probably a year or more. I mean, until we hired an admin. It's like Satya was the admin, was HR, was, customer success, marketing, and I'm kind of like along for the ride with her to like how help in any way that I can, and we're just like doing everything. So that's been kind of like the litmus test of like when we really need to like hire somebody is like, okay, this is getting painful for us to do. Not that we can't do it, but it's like, well, it's just sort of making it less fun and less enjoyable and maybe, you know, unsustainable. It's like, well, it wasn't sustainable to start with because it couldn't be. We had to like charge hard. So that's kind of been what I'd say the last 9 months of our company has been about is like, all right, like if we want to grow, if we want to reach more people, if we want to scale beyond what we've built, then the system, the org chart, the way that we've structured it hasn't been right. We have to have a better team. Yeah. And it's interesting because that's what we've been focused on. And then I go to that dinner with the Hermosis and Layla's, basically like that is their, from what I can take away from my conversations with them and looking at how they've worked with other companies, like that's where they're really skilled.
Their
like
superpower, if you will.
They can come in and it's like, okay, we can pick the team, we can build the team, and then we can get this thing, you know, and along the way, like, let's fix some of the problems with how you're packaging and pricing and what you're doing in your marketing, but like, let's get the right people that will know how to make those decisions for you. And I think that was like her big, you know, feedback was like, yeah, you're still like, you've been building team, but like you're still in it. Like you still might not have all the right players and pieces to take the next jump, you know, because they're looking at it like, can we come in and take you from 3 to 30? Like, how could we 10x your business? How could we 5x your business? Like,
and they've got to look at the bottlenecks that you've already created and the constraints that are in there, and now they have to unwind that ball.
Yeah, because their thesis is like, hey, if you've hit that 3 to 5 million in revenue mark, then you have product market, like you've proven that the market loves what you do. And now it's like, okay, how do we just go from product market fit to like scale? And it's the right team, it's good process, and then it's, you know, relentless doing what they call the boring work over and over and over again. And so that's, you know, I'm not like an operator, like I'm not like a, you know, an executive wizard. Like I never was when I was a CrossFit gym owner. Like I had success on the heels of being like a thoughtful, caring coach who had a decent amount of knowledge and could, you know, get buy-in from the people that were around him and the coaches, and that I had also like, I think just a good sense about like money and investment and like, okay, we have to really keep our profit margins as high as we can. We need to save money. We need to be smart about where we reinvest. Like we don't need to put a bunch of money into that right now. Like, and I've always protected that in our businesses. So those have been the things that I've contributed a lot over the years, but everything else, like I was a novice to an intermediate. Now I'm still in like the intermediate understanding of business, and that's the team and the support that I need around me to, you know, whatever, see what the next evolution of growth could look like for this company. And I'll just say this too, it's like it's easy to get, you know, as a business, it's like, well, what do you do as a business? Well, you provide a service in our case, and then like, okay, how good's that service? How great are the people's experience? Like, that's one way to measure the success of your business. People are like loving it. And then the other way to measure is like, are you growing? Are you doing that with more and more people? And, you know, the other thing that I think gets lost in that conversation is like, we're always talking about growth, is like, is this really fulfilling still to me, the business owner, and the people that work here? Like, are we loving the opportunity to do this thing over and over and over again? Or are we just like, forget whether we're loving it, like, how do we grow? How do we grow? How do we grow? You know, because I never got into this thinking like, okay, we're going to grow, we're going to sell this thing for a multiple. Like, let's just, you know, like I was at that dinner and there were people at that dinner table who were like, yeah, like we're hardcore going to sell this thing in the next year. Like they're asking questions like, how did you sell your business? What are the process? Like, you know, we want out. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Like, and then these guys over here are like, yeah, we have like a 5-year plan. We're going to grow this, and then we're going to sell to like, you know, one of the bigger installers in the country. And I'm like, you already know that? Like, that's just different to me. I never considered that.
a good tactic based on whatever, for everything Marcus is saying, if anyone's listening to this at home, one of the exercises I really like for people is like write down your current org chart, which for most people, again, might be an exercise they've never done before. Like take the current org chart and then create the aspirational one based on whatever maybe that, 5-year vision is or whatever. Like, what do you think the team would look like that you'd have to do? Because we'd all agree the team is going to have to look different in the future for your future goals than what it is now. But that's such a component of it. Is number one, it allows you to play pretend and make believe as to what am I going to do. And I think some of us we're so cautious or so worried about the now because there's so much to do now. We don't take time to kind of have that brain dump and just sit and think about, well, what do I want it to be? What could it be? What if it's but no, I don't want to put that number down. That's crazy. I'll never make that much money. I say, like, fuck it. No, like, you should have like a big 10-year picture kind of goal that almost seems audacious that you wouldn't even want to speak into existence in front of someone because a more experienced entrepreneur might laugh at you. Like, you think you're going to do that? That's the kind of 10-year plan I want you to have, because now it doesn't really matter. Now it's ultimately a little bit more about like, okay, what does it take to get there? And what it always comes down to are humans. It takes the right humans, being in the right seats type scenario. And that's the hardest thing. You can change a program, adjust the marketing style, all that relatively quicker than you can develop a human, recruit a human, and get them to find their potential within the role in your company. That stuff I mean, we're talking years and years on that process.
Yeah.
When we look at this, and I wrote this, I wrote down this note on here, kind of the economics of an online business model. We were talking margins. Do you know where you guys sit now? Like what that profit margin looks like now that you guys are at the highest end of the revenue that you've done? Have you been able to preserve that profit margin, or has it we've kind of lost it a little because we've had to spend money on expansion and staff and things like that?
I mean, I looked at some of these numbers recently before going to dinner, just to be like, I want to kind of have something to present or something to talk about if it comes up, which it did not. No one was like digging into numbers like, tell me about your numbers, because I didn't feel like I was on Shark Tank. Although I went in thinking that might be the case. It was a different energy, which
Alex Ramosi would be a great guy on Shark Tank.
I was thinking that. I was like, man, what's the roadmap to getting him on Shark Tank? Although, as I think about it, it's like that's not really the play that it sounds like they're trying to make with companies, like, at least some of the pitches and what people are asking for.
Sure.
But yeah, like we basically kind of had looked at, okay, relative to pre-pandemic to today, how have our total profits or like our gross revenue and our margins changed, and they've gotten better in both cases. So we've been able to preserve. The question would probably be, and we don't have enough, we haven't played out the whole year. It's like, okay, what does our margin look like from December 2021 to December 2022? Because we've done the majority of our hiring in the last 8 months, and so that's the number that I'm curious to look at. It's at this point pretty stable and kind of we're growing enough in revenue along with our increased expenses to maintain some margin. Although the goal is like you add bodies, and then you scale up revenue, and like ultimately you could see maybe a better return and better profit.
It's very
margin.
hard to do both at once, to grow your revenue and increase the margin. To do both simultaneously generally never happens. It's one and then a laggard of the other.
Yeah. So and the other part that's a little bit confounding in that is that we because we offer one-to-many and a one-to-one service, like those margins are very different. Just because we're paying coaches for the work that they're doing, which they get compensated much more than what they should. So those two business lines, like how are they growing relative to each other? I mean, the one-to-many grows has scaled a lot more in the last couple of years. But yeah, our margins have stayed pretty consistent, and that's something that has also been like something I'm pretty attached to as a business owner, is like, hey, this is what I've experienced in the past many years. This is what I've come to expect. Like, when is the time? And this was one of my like questions and challenges that I was like bringing to the dinner, was like, when's the time to really say, okay, we need to make a sizable investment for this long, and we need to just eat into some of that margin because it's necessary to see a big growth on the back end. How do you quantify that? What are the
calculate
indicators
that risk?
Yeah, how do you calculate that risk? And Where do they prioritize, like, taking risk when it comes to building businesses? I didn't get to have that like specific conversation and get some specific answers from it, but it's still a big question that I have.
My personal experience with that, and the advice or the anecdotal advice I always provide, is when you don't have a lot of money, when you're starting the business off, you're way more willing to take risk. And then you've worked your ass off. You're like, fuck, cool, I've got this margin. It's kind of what I'm expected. It's kind of what I'm used to. I've got a lifestyle. My employees have a lifestyle. I don't want to risk that, because what if I'm wrong? It's kind of like someone who, once they make money, they're constantly scared of like, fuck, what if this ride ends at some point, kind of scenario. And then, I'll have a gym, very similar. Like, okay, margins are good, but we're not really growing. We're just kind of gliding on a horizontal. I want to hockey stick. At what point, like, how do I take this thing down? Do I purposely reinvest? And how much of my margin do I let go? Like, what's a safe, comfortable number? And that's generally where it's like, well, things are gliding at a horizontal, nice and steady, and you're not growing. It's pretty reliable. It's pretty predictable. Yeah. If you can find a way for yourself to back out a little and create an ancillary singular source of income. And this is like, I've heard someone analyze this on YouTube. It's like Gary Vaynerchuk, he's able to, on just speaking gigs alone, that ancillary revenue that comes in, he's able to run his business at a crazy low margin because he doesn't need to extract money out of there, and he can reinvest it into growth and growth and growth constantly because he's got this other idea, this other thing over here. And that's what I did with the gym. When I bought that building and I was outfitting it, I mean, I took my margins down to like nothing. But I had the benefit of starting this thing in 2015, and I had that revenue. So as an owner, I no longer had to extract any money out of it. I had the guys who did all our direct deposits and our finance planning. I said, take me off the tap. Like, I don't want any more money out of the gym. Yeah. And I'm going to reinvest that into people and this new building and all this other shit. But that was the thing realistically. Or the other play is take cash from somebody. Right? Yeah. Like something that allows you to do that. Like, but it's a really hard question.
Well, I was listening to, listening to Alex Hermosi talk about it on a podcast recently. I think it was on his More Plates, More Dates podcast. And I
didn't know he did Derek's podcast. That's cool. I got to listen to that.
It's pretty good. But he said, like, it was on this question of like reinvesting into the business. He's like, a good business should spit off cash. Like, and when you reinvest, technically that would be taking money, profits, and buying appreciable assets. Like, that's what reinvestment looks like. Mm-hmm. If you are just pouring money back in and you're bringing your margins down to zero, then for the period of time that you're doing that business is not good. Like, it's not making any profit. And
buying 20 more assault bikes.
Yeah, right, like nobody's looking for that. Yes. So, you have to, and that's kind of how I like, that really resonated with me. It's like, so, if we're running margins like this and, every month there's cash to take home, like, I'm either taking that cash home and investing it myself, or, using it to live, and then whatever's left, like, I'm saving it, putting it in investments. Like, I'm basically going to say, how do I maximize this for my future and my family's future? Or I'm going to take that margin and I'm going to use the business vehicle to go and buy something that will be worth something in 10, 20, 30 years, much like whatever, a multiple that makes sense.
Take my cash and have it make cash.
Yeah. And the third option is like, I'm going to take that money and I'm just going to go and like run a bunch more ads and buy a bunch more equipment for the gym and, hire 10 more people. And unless that expense immediately like doubles or triples revenue, like to account for like that increased expense, like, then your margins are just getting smaller and smaller. And then 6 months later, you're like, oh, well, all that reinvestment, that wasn't reinvestment. It was just poor allocation of cash and expense. And now our company is working at, half the margins that we used to, and we're not as good a company anymore.
And that's it. That kind of leads perfectly into the next thing. Spending money on marketing is calculated gambling. Yes. Is essentially what it is. I do believe you have to, I believe HR is an investment. I don't, like, when I look at payroll on an expense line, in my head, I'm like, it's an investment. When I look at marketing, I'm like, that's an investment. But marketing is the one that is a very calculated gamble. At least on, if I invest in payroll and I give everyone raises, I have a great idea what the output's going to be of that money, almost guaranteed. For you have the brick and mortar equivalent of a retail location on the very busy street. So gyms switched, Glassman got everyone into, he wrote, what the fuck was the name of that article? It was a 2-part journal article about setting up a warehouse gym.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was '08 when we could all go get flex industrial warehouse spaces like this and get a year and a half free because the fucking crash had just happened, right? And then as like Orange Theory and the boutique microgym market sophisticate, we all find ourselves in a retail location where there are eyeballs with the idea, at least from a business planning perspective, I will spend X amount more in triple net leases and CAM and all that stuff for this location, but I won't be spending it in marketing because I have, 50,000 VPD vehicles per day, whatever it is. With a following like what Marcus Philly has organically, right? You're not paying Instagram every month for that. Can you, when did you have to stop feeding off your own ecosystem there? Like when did that hundreds of thousands of people watching you be like, dude, this isn't enough. We have to pay for more traffic. Like how, like we're looking at Marcus and marketing, it's like, fuck, I've like spent all this time building up this following.
Yeah.
I should be able to organically, hopefully, make shit churn. I talked with Pastuch about this because he's tried so many different marketing options from my conversations with him. And he's like, still, nothing does better for our sales than when I get on there and I turn on the faucet myself and I go live or I do this or I do that. Mm-hmm. How is that thought about from a marketing perspective when you guys are talking, from that perspective? You're having to buy traffic and it's like, okay, what is my organic reach right now responsible for revenue wise, and how do we compare that when buying traffic?
It's a great question. Aside from in 2000, I think it was 2019, maybe September of 2019 to like March of 2020, we hired like an outside agency to like run some paid ads for us. Outside of that, and then in March, we like, well, things are changing. We're going to take this in-house. And Sati was like, I'm just going to like turn the volume way down on this. And basically after about 2-3 months, we just stopped it. So all in probably like 7 months in our history of running paid traffic. And there was when we had the agency working for us, like they weren't really connected with our brand message. Like it just didn't work to get the return that we were paying for at the time. So for 6 years, it's been almost solely organic.
Sure.
And, at this point, I think we're at the stage where we're like, okay, this is definitely the time for us to, expand beyond just like our organic reach and make a decision as to like how are we going to go about what's our strategy for going about buying eyeballs and paying for marketing through ads, and it's really a big question mark for us. Like we don't have a good answer to it, and it's really just in its infancy for our company. And that's one of the big things that we're like, okay, in 2022, like how do we unlock this for us? What's going to work in the model that we have? What's going to spread the message of functional bodybuilding, get more people in?
For you personally, I'm going to share how I feel about this. And I'm really curious your take. I thought the same thing. I was like, okay, and I'm operating on such a micro scale compared to you, but the ideas are very similar. I'm like, okay, I've got this organic following. It is done. I've been able to generate X in revenue, right? Thinking about marketing is that big question mark. Again, it's this calculated gamble, and I don't enjoy it. Like, I don't like thinking about it. I don't like talking to anyone who does ads. I don't even enjoy that process.
Yeah.
What I do enjoy doing is I love I'm looking here at your plaque. We've got this passing 100,000 subscribers YouTube plaque here. And you can see guys like Alex has obviously poured a ton of effort into his YouTube channel and things like that. The thing that really excites me is like organically, if I stay in the organic compound and I'm like, okay, well, how do I'm doing good with this kind of following. If we got Marcus Foley to 1 million followers, are we still even are you guys even talking about buying paid ads at that point? Do you need to? Does a plus 300, 200,000 followers on Instagram or another 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, does that solve this now need to buy traffic? And if that's the case, then how do I organically get there? Because I organically got here. I got to almost 1 million people organically. I never paid for a single one of these people. So, and that's like where this idea came in. I was like, oh, what can I do? I'm like, it was the pandemic. I listened to my first full Joe Rogan podcast. I'd never listened to one.
Yeah.
I just like, who the fuck has the time to sit there and do that? And that's where this idea, I'm like, I'm going to go around and I'm going to do this because no one else is, no one else maybe has the bandwidth to literally pack up and travel and go and do this in real life with people, not just a Zoom one.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to track whether that was the connector, but we saw upticks and everything on that front. And it was like, okay, well, that's the only thing that's really changed. I'm literally doing the exact same thing I've always done. I've just added in 220 extra clips a year or however many hours of content from these cool conversations that I'm having. But it was more fun for me to think of like the organic strat, the fun organic shit than it was to sit there and be like, all right, here's 20 grand to a firm. Let's see, roll the dice and with my money and see what you can do.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know. I think we're at a stage where we're trying to pull all levers. We're not like, well, let's just focus here. Let's just focus here. We're scaling up our social media or our media content production and distribution. It's like Instagram as a platform is very different now than it was 3-4 years ago. So the platform's changing. The ability to like really not go viral, but at least just like get into new spheres and really explode on Instagram is challenging. It's super hard. Like you've got to put in like there's a formula there that's difficult to figure out. YouTube is, we had a big first year, like last year was like our big full first year on YouTube, and periodically we get a home run video that gets, a couple 100,000 views. It's big, it's viral. But for the most part, we have like a steady, kind of growth rate, which is great. But, are we going to go from 100,000 or 125 to 225 like in the next couple months? I don't see that happening, or the next 6 months. I think it's going to be a slow climb until we have something big that changes. And what are we doing? Well, we're just going to put out more frequent content there. We haven't really explored deeply TikTok as a platform, but that's an area that we have to be on. So we launched maybe about a month ago on there, and it's like, okay, how do we start to drip out content to just more different sources that people are consuming? And I don't think that we have a podcast that we do. I have long form YouTube content. We're doing shorts on YouTube. We do Instagram content. We're getting opportunities to like travel and see, like we film stuff in Sweden. Like we have content to repurpose, but that's just about scaling up your media department. It's like there's only so much Nate can do to edit. Our conversation last night about distributing more content and getting more clips, like and companies that you can work with to do that. Like that was super interesting to me. It's like, okay, we have all this content here. Like how do we just get it onto, get it in front of more eyeballs? And then it's like, okay, well, what about a paid strategy to do that? Like we have great stuff that speaks to people, and it has at different times when algorithms were different, when the landscape of social media, when the pandemic hit and people were like, I'm just on Instagram all the time because I'm at home. And I saw just a dramatic growth in my Instagram account during those first 6 months of the pandemic, which I haven't experienced since probably 2016. It's like, so what could change that and bring that kind of hockey stick type of growth? I don't know where it's going to come from. And I'm not like trying to spend all my time be like, what's the hockey stick growth strategy? It's more like, what's the steady, consistent growth strategy on all platforms, paid, organic, email, like let's improve SEO. Let's kind of do a little bit of everything. And because I think that that's ultimately what's actually a bit more sustainable, to feel the pressure of like, I got to go come up with like a home run idea that's going to really just like change everything and 10x what we're doing. Like that's unrealistic, unlikely, and also just maybe probably a waste of like good energy that could be distributed amongst other platforms.
If I'm Satya and I'm sitting here having conversations with you, I agree 1,000%, and I'm thinking of this from a marketing perspective. It's like everything you do on YouTube and all the videos you put out on Instagram and all that, they're all there to help someone solve a problem, answer a question, whatever it is. But at some point, just like training, if you're doing the same 3x10 or the same whatever, you need just a different one. And I watched the clip. this was, dude, you'll have to tell me when this was. This was months ago, maybe. And I instantly had a content idea that I was like, when I go do the podcast with Marcus, I'm going to run it by him.
Yeah.
I think you were local, but you were off somewhere else, and you just dropped into a Globo gym. And you were kind of talking about, like, I was there, and like some guys were kind of, they were broing me up a little bit. You had a tank top on. It was this whole thing. And because you're always training in your compound here or in these isolated backyard clips, it's like, man, what would be so YouTube and just so different than anything anyone's doing is if you take a couple of your guys like Nate and you do kind of almost like, it's not a prank video by any means, like a Nelk Boys thing. It's very much just like, if Marcus is in the gym and you're doing functional bodybuilding, like in a Globo gym, number one, that's just going to like, it's a production, and you know how hard it is to get all your equipment in one area and all that, but show that, because that's where probably a lot of your functional bodybuilders are in these YMCA Globo gyms. And they can see you go through the struggle of that, and you do the secret mic underneath the shirt, and people are like, hey man, I was using that, and just that, I would laugh my dick off watching, be like, oh no, I'm using that landmine right there, yeah, no, I'll be back to it in a minute, like, but they would be able to relate to it. And that moment when somebody would come up to you like, bro, what program you follow? And you just fucking call it like, bro, what program you follow with Marcus Philly, where you go and drop in the random big Globo gyms and you put on your workouts. And then you get the reaction of like, you've seen those videos on YouTube where like a girl deadlifts 305 and every dude in the back is like, oh, fuck me. Like, holy, but like the camera guy who's doing the hidden camera zooms out and gets everyone's reaction. But it makes it so real, because so many of us that go and work out in those kind of formats and we watch you, it's like, man, but what is it? How does that look like when he has to go and he's got to deal with some fuck who takes his 15-pound, 25-pound dumbbells?
I should have had Nate with me when I was working out at the Aria in Vegas, because it was like that.
Yeah.
And some guy came up, like there was what was I using? Oh, I was doing like an EMOM of like dumbbell rows, single arm dumbbell rows with the 100, like one of the hundreds. And like, there's 95s, there's other weights. He comes up, he's like, hey man, can I use that? I want to, get a set of like deadlifts in. And I'm like, my clock is there. It's like counting down. I'm like, I got 5 more minutes. I'll be done. Like I'm like, and he's like, oh, okay, cool. And he grabs the 95s and he's like struggling with it. I'm like, you were good.
That would have been a great little clip though.
Yeah.
But it's those kind of, I guess maybe, and that just, I like the creativity in my brain, and what I'm always thinking is that's why I think I love organic strategies. Yeah. Because it just allows me to like, I don't know, like allows me to be like maybe a producer or director, just think about like, what would I want to see? Like what would be super entertaining for me? Yeah. And why can't I see that? Oh, because no one else is doing it, which now is the perfect equation for why I should hit the record button and do that.
I mean, I still, well, actually, this is a good tangent a little bit to go on, but it's like the time and energy that it takes to like really be pushing the envelope on content is massive. You know this. Like it takes a lot of brain power to just not only produce the content, but then to also be creative and to think of the next idea. And it's like content creation is full on. So when someone says like, hey, what do you do for your company? It's like, well, I create content, I write programs. They're like, oh, how long does it take to write the program? I'm like, the question should be like, how long does it really take to do this? Like, this is a massive investment of time. So as somebody who's like playing, wearing a couple different hats for the company, it's like, there's been a lot of energy that's gone into some of these other buckets over here to try and solidify our company, which has meant like, okay, I haven't been able to put, 10 hours a week into just the creative of like, how am I going to make something that's really different and unique for content? I'm starting to make more room for that again, where it's like, okay, I see the value and the need to really set aside time to not just like, take training content or take the content that we film every week and just, repurpose it into Instagram and YouTube, but to like, okay, let's create, these are like 5 ideas that we have that we think could be really successful, and let's sort of like create some, new ways of filming and maybe new environments, and then, maybe have a tone shift to this. Let's bring some humor into it. Maybe this is how, like, let's think of a whole new concept and then go and test them all out. Test these over the next month and see which one works the best, and then maybe lean into that. Like, that's something that I'm kind of moving back towards, and it's cyclical. It's like, it can't be in that mindset all the time, because that takes so much work where it's like, when's the other work getting done?
Sure.
When is like refining the product? When is refining the programs? When is, mentoring the coaches, and when is building up the staff, and when does all that happen? Like it was, Alex was saying, he's like, yeah, I can't, like his content creation. He's like, I mean, he downplays like the energy that goes into it, but he's also like, look, I need to be working on the business, like that's where the value is. Like making content, like, and that can't be my focus. Like if I get too caught up in that, like I'm not doing the right thing for my company, because it does suck a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And so it's like, he's like, yeah, every couple weeks I'll film, 3 videos and then I'm done. It's like, we all want to have that ability to just like, hey, I just had 3 ideas. I got in front of camera. It's like, those people are real geniuses, and they really have like, he obviously has a natural ability to, think through frameworks and then talk about them eloquently, and then, to produce something like that for most people would be like, that's a full-time job, but it's like a side gig, while he's focused on his business.
He's a unique one though. Our content creation is so directly tied to our success in business right now. Whereas he was successful in business and then realized what he went back. He's like, okay, I need to do a little more Gary Vee. I need to do a little more Simon Sinek. I need to create some more content and create a little bit more of a legacy around me and this idea that I have, kind of thing. Because I think about, for us and what we do in the online space, that megaphone, that content creation, like, we have to work on the business, but also at the same time, you'd realize like the storytelling and the message that's going digitally through the airwaves, I would say is almost more valuable than the actual end product itself at a time. It's a chicken or the egg, 6.5 one way, a dozen the other type of conversation. Because without being able to story tell something that someone goes, Dad, I have that fucking problem, and he fixed it, he solved it, or he told me how to do it better, or whatever it is, they never get to the product. Because once they get to a product, no one's ever tried your workout, but like, that workout sucked, I'm canceling today. They probably haven't. You probably had a lot of different attempts for times for them to try functional bodybuilding. Like, oh, the second workout was better. I didn't like the first workout the first time I did it. I liked the second one. And when I emailed, Cliff emailed me right back, and I really like that customer service. And the new app that they're using is really good. As once you have a customer, you have multiple opportunities to prove yourself to them. It's not just one and done.
Yeah.
It is one and done on a messaging. Like, if you don't get to them first, you never get to them. Like a tree falls in the woods, no one can hear it, mime, or whatever the fuck that saying is. So I always just think about messaging and marketing is like, and I hate thinking of it as marketing because it's just such an expense and such an agency type play these days. But it's like the uniqueness and the creativity in your messaging, I almost put as more of a pedestal. I think it's harder to do. It's harder to be creative. Like, that's the area that more people are spending more time on, driving the bottom line of the business or coming up with the program and all that. But it's like, that's the work ultimately, like that allows the other thing to make the money that it makes.
Yeah. I agree in part with what you're saying, and I definitely have put a lot of energy into that. Like, and maybe at times I've leaned very heavily over there and less on the product side. But like, if the product is a winner, then every single person that's in the product is just going to do all your marketing for you. Or, your word of mouth is going to be powerful. And, like somebody put somebody I follow, it's like, he's a business coach, and he's like, if I told you today that you could never go and market and get another customer, what would you be doing differently about your product? Like, how would you be servicing your customers differently? Because that is now the only way you're going to get new customers is through them. So it's like, how do you balance, which direction you're going? Put too much energy over here. Okay, come back to like the actual service. Make sure it's amazing. Make sure that it blows people's minds. Like, sell the expectation here, and then when they get in, they get 2x that, and they're like, whoa, like, hey, Jeff, you got to get into this program. It's sick. Like, I'm getting all this great information, this great resources. Like, the workouts are killer. Like, I feel like I'm, getting exactly what I was missing. Like, then, so anyhow, it's certainly a balancing act, and that's why, like, I'm thankful to have Satya here to think in this department a lot for, on my behalf. Like, I'm not constantly thinking about how we're going to go and acquire new people and get new eyeballs and, you know, revamp our content strategy. Like, she's putting a lot of energy towards that too. And at the end of the day, I have to be in front of the camera. I'm going to do a certain amount of, I have to help produce the content too. So anyway, that balancing act, I think, is important to like keep in mind, that you can't have one without the other. And if one were to go away completely, like the messaging, like you don't have a way to message, you know, like your Instagram account gets pulled down, your
correct.
YouTube account gets, you know, taken down. Like, all right, well, what else you got?
You're back to the dark days of you know, having to, again, just word of mouth type scenario, you know, when the Yellow Pages was your Instagram, you know, type scenario. Right. You also mentioned that Layla had also, she was talking to you kind of about, you know, ascending that high ticket sale that you guys have, which is the 1-to-1. Talk to me about that. So you currently have 1-to-1. One-to-many, break it down, just ballpark percentages. What percentage of your total revenue is one-to-many versus 1-to-1?
It's like 75-25.
That's still pretty good.
70-30, 70, yeah.
That's pretty good. And that's where Brianna, she comes into play there, and all your other coaches and things like that. If growing that part of the business, which is, again, that one's dependent on more humans, right, to run that side, it becomes a more expensive part of the business. Do you believe do other people that just go straight to 1-to-1, like they come in, go right to high ticket, or is that journey, you know, AS3 and then into persist, and that, like, is it part, like, how do you kind of view that?
Yeah, I mean, it's about, I think, and this is going based upon the numbers that my sales guy gives me, but it's about 50% of conversations are with people that have done persist and they're going into 1-to-1, or that have never done it. They just heard about FBB and they resonated with the sales page on personal coaching and accountability and nutrition and the whole deal, and I'm going to go 1-to-1. So yeah, it's the constraint there, of course, is the coach's time and how they allocate their time to service a 1-to-1 client and give them the value that they're expecting.
Is it a similar payroll model as your individual design kind of idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing that? Like, what does that look like? Like, so if individual design or 1-to-1 is $350 or whatever it is, do coaches get a cut of that?
That's right. Okay. Yeah, they're paid based upon the number of clients that they have and a percentage of the revenue that those customers are paying. And it starts, you know, that over time increases with their base price point. And just I suppose that has something to do with how long they've been with us, but sort of like tops out at like 55, percent to the coach, 45% to the business. And then that 45% is, getting allocated to marketing, media, sales, admin, whatever software costs we might have from paying for True Coach and, other platforms that we use to like operate that business. But yeah, and then obviously employee benefits. Like we have a good benefits package for all of our employees that are full-time.
A vulnerability, in the brick and mortar scene with personal training, which is the equivalent of, your individual design remote coaching, is obviously I'm going to fall out with Trainer X. Trainer X is going to say deuces and take their 30 clients with them.
Sure.
The one thing I always tell an owner is, like, first off, now Trainer X has to stand up a fucking building, a spot, a facility.
Yeah.
It has to be convenient, because even if client J loves Trainer X, but Trainer X's facility is a warehouse that's 20 minutes on the other side of town, client J is going to say, I love you, homie, good luck, but I'm going to stay here at this location, because convenience is king in brick and mortar. That's not the case with you. I mean, if and she's phenomenal, she would. But if Bree was like deuces, Marcus, and bounced, I mean, how do you think about that from a vulnerability standpoint? Because at some point, what's stopping a coach from doing that? And even the best non-compete, all these other
none of them mean anything.
No. So how do you think of that?
I mean, I think at different stages of our company, like, it was a big stress and a worry for me. But I think that if I'm providing a lot, if I feel like we as a company and we work hard to provide a lot for our coaches, from leads, number one, to like new customers, like here's new customer, like we're providing you new customers all the time, and we have a system for supporting you being like a better professional. Like we have an administrative team that takes a whole lot of stuff off of your plate. We have, benefits package that is, competitive. We have 401k, health benefits for our coaches, all of our employees. There's a brand and a method that you can stand behind and you can like own, and there's systems and there's process. You give them, make their life as easy as possible to do the job that they like to do, then, that's as much as we can do. And if a coach decides that they want to go and do this on their own, then, there is nothing that we can do about that. I think what the customers that have been with these coaches, after a year, if they've been with them for 2 years, like they start to feel like more of an attachment and a alliance with the coach than maybe they do the brand. But for many of the customers that are doing one-to-one, like they have a very strong connection to the brand of functional bodybuilding. They resonate with what I'm sharing, what the messages that we're putting out, what Sati is writing. Like they're included in a lot of the things that we are doing on a regular basis in terms of like ongoing community education and feeling part of the community. So I'm not saying we do all those things to like mitigate the risk of like a coach leaving and we want to like capture those customers, but we certainly want those customers to feel like they're functional bodybuilding clients and Brianna's client. And I think that also ends up being something that the coach sees as like a value. Like, hey, when I'm here, and I had a conversation with one of our coaches recently, very direct on this. I was like, why are you staying, like, versus going? He's like, well, because I've done it on my own. Like, I know how hard it is to do it this way. Like having, he rattled off 5 reasons why this is the place for him to be, as opposed to trying to go do it on his own. He's like, I could probably, I would make more money per customer if I had them on my own. But like on my end is that I have more admin work to do. I have to go and get my own customers all the time. Like I have to do all of these things that I don't have to do now. And that from like a life balance perspective just shifts things so much that, is that added cost or that added revenue that he's going to get from being able to bill his clients directly, is he going to make up for the cost that's going to come in time and energy and his own resources to get new customers, to like be able to service these clients while trying to get new clients? And, it's interesting because we certainly have an incentive system built in to like reward a coach for if they get their own client, like we can change the pricing tier structure so that you make a bit more than if we feed you a client. It's not so, we haven't maybe incentivized it enough to really get coaches to go do it because they don't.
Yes.
Or at the end of the day, they're just like, well, you're handing me 3 to 5 new clients a month, and
because there's no consequence. If they own their own online company and they didn't get clients, there's a direct consequence there.
Sure.
When they're at 1099, it's everything you're saying is so, and I really hope everyone listening, I don't care whether you have brick and mortar online, it's so interesting and valuable. And you're right. There's nothing you can do. Incentivizing them is the number one thing. And I was creating a model. It was an online gym. They converted during 2020, and they said, Stu, this is my biggest fear, like blah, blah, blah. The one thing we kind of came up with as I was helping them build this out is like, you need to then just, if you're really fearful, take the fear out. I want to lower that fear. I probably can't take it to 0, but I probably can lower it. Why would anyone take the clients and leave? Because they believe they could do it better themselves. What's the hardest thing about them doing it better themselves? Actually acquiring the clients. Your brand, your following, all this is what brings people in. So we created on a 12-month schedule 2 months of blackout months where that coach is not fed, because it's kind of like a hostess system. A hostess seats new clients with different coaches based on, you'll get with this person also played volleyball or whatever it may be. So 2 months where there's a blackout, you actually don't get any new clients during that time. Maybe there's corporate trainings. We have other things we need you spending some time doing and taking on new. But those 2 months will be enough for someone to be like, fuck, this kind of sucks not getting any new clients this month. And now maybe they have the chops and they hit the road and they're outside on their own social media and they're drawing a few clients in. Yeah. And now you're able to see, oh, this person can sell too. They might have value to me beyond just doing remote coaching. Maybe I could also bring them into some kind of a sales training role with these coaches.
Yeah, interesting.
But restrict the food for a month and just see how it fares. And I think it's enough of a reminder, like, oh fuck, I like getting fed, right? Like,
Yeah.
when the bear's hungry, he eats, but it's because you're always feeding me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah. When I was making notes here on this, the high ticket offer, and then I asked you last night, I said, this functional bodybuilding kind of, its legacy and its growth potential, does it increase more getting more customers? Does it increase more by adding the high ticket sales and getting that from 25% of revenue up to 45% of revenue? Does it increase more from becoming, parallel as an actual fitness methodology that is taught, like we talked about, like how CrossFit with the certifications, all that? From a legacy perspective, and I'm sure it's a little bit of all of it, where does functional bodybuilding leave the biggest legacy impact? Is it on more customers who follow programs? Is it on coaches who go around spreading the gospel, just like we all did with CrossFit? Where do you kind of see that from a legacy perspective? Like, I want someone to, I'm going to ask you the last question of the workout, the last question of this, but like, how do we get Marcus Philly's head on that Mount Rushmore of influential strength and conditioning coaches in the fitness industry?
Interesting. Well, I don't know. I don't aspire to be on the Mount Rushmore of the strength conditioning fitness industry of coaches, because to me, I'm still a student, and I think I'll always be a student, and I'm looking to those individuals. I don't necessarily, and I think who falls on those, as I would see it, that Mount Rushmore of like influential coaches in the strength and conditioning world and fitness world are people that have like really, changed the way people think about fitness. That's Greg Glassman in a way. That's kind of Ben Patrick in a way. I only say it like kind of because he's still young in terms of like global awareness, but man, what he's done in a couple of years is pretty profound. It's called, of course, people like Louis Simmons and like, Brett Contreras, people like that have just like had a paradigm shift. I see functional bodybuilding as a safe place to bring in a little bit of everybody. That's what we're trying to create. It's like, you love to do bodybuilding, you love to do bicep curls and do box jumps. Like, it's cool. You can come here. Like, you don't have to get shamed for trying to sneak in some bicep curls in the back of your gym where like everyone thinks bicep curls are, the devil, and you're only supposed to be doing burpees and, kipping chin-ups. Like, I want you to feel like it's okay to like follow a thoughtful like cardio program next to your powerlifting. Like, it's not going to eat away your gains. Like, you can do that here. So I'm in terms of like legacy of functional bodybuilding, like I resonate so much with Alex Hormozy's like talk about legacies. Like, when I'm done, like, at least one generation out from my death, like no one's going to remember me.
Correct. Yeah.
5 generations, absolutely no chance.
Yep.
Like, and if I have a name that lives on beyond that, like it's for like little fleeting moments of like somebody's,
Sure.
life, right? And their day. So I think that like what I want functional bodybuilding to continue to do is to, I was on a call yesterday with, there were about 12 of these individuals who are Persist members. They product test for us. They're 3 weeks ahead of the bulk of our one-to-many program subscribers. And they were talking to us about like how they're using this in their various lives. Like, and I think his name was Sam, or maybe it was Joe. It was like, I'm a super busy guy. I work a busy job. This is how much time I have, and I want to just get in and get after it. And I'm looking for this feeling so that I can go on with my evening and do this. Yeah. And then this is like, I'm a busy mom and I got to get my 5 days a week in. Like, I'm really dedicated to it. I want to have like energy afterwards. Like I follow every part of your training. Like, I do the warm up, I do this, I follow it to the T, like, and I can't not do it. So this is what I need out of it. And I'm like, I want to allow people to like check the box on their health and fitness in a way that's like enjoyable, effective, safe, and is like, now they can just go and really bring energy into their world. Like, I want that for me in life. Like, I want my fitness to be the thing that allows me to go back home and be an awesome dad and really just connect with life. You know, I don't want it to be a distraction from people. I don't want it to be the thing that they're like, how am I going to get in shape? It's like, I just want to, it's like you shower each day, you brush your teeth, you do functional bodybuilding, like you just check. And, you know, more than a shower and brushing your teeth, like, actually, people really like their showers, but like you really like, you know, that's a pretty sweet hour of your day to go and move and to express your body. And again, like that word safe and inclusive or accessible, like I want it to feel safe to be like, yeah, I do this thing. Not like safe, it's not going to injure me, but like I can do all these things in the gym and it's not going to be like weird, you know, and that is going to be accomplished, you know, back to your question, by more subscribers, more people doing functional bodybuilding in gyms. You know, like I want people to like, you know, there's a period of time during the ATS days when it was like really making its way through CrossFit gyms, because like a lot of CrossFit coaches and just people at like the competitors, people that were already doing their own thing at the gym were starting to do ATS at CrossFit boxes, where it was like I'd get messages all the time like, yeah, I was at like this gym and I was doing ATS, and someone was like, hey, you're doing ATS.
Yeah,
and they just knew it. You know, they recognize it. Like, I want that to start happening in, you know, SF Fitness, in, you know, 24-hour fitness, and Gold's Gym, and it does happen. It certainly does. It's like you can see it. It's like, oh, you're doing a Cossack squat and you're doing like a, you know, a kneeling press,
Philly press. Yeah.
Like, let's do that. You know, I want to make that happen. So it's going to happen with more subscribers. It's definitely going to happen when there's coaches who are like, hey, I'm coaching this to all my people. You know, I'm spreading this message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go into the, you know, the virality of functional bodybuilding or any movement. There's a great book called Talk Triggers by Jay Baer. And it's like, you got to find that thing that people just intrinsically want to either hashtag or wear, or it's the movement in what they do. The Philly press is so funny. The gym I go to now, I think maybe I text messaged the GM and I was busting his balls. He had Philly press in the workout.
Yeah.
He spelled it PH, and I think I texted him. I think I said something. I was like, brother, give credit where credit's due, goddammit. But no, it's one of these deals where, do you think about that in your programming? We talked about like, okay, how do I continue to make functional bodybuilding unique? Right? I can't like, sure, it definitely looks different, but the more people that copy it, the more my need to pull away and really make it unique to where even when people copy it, be like, oh no, that's totally functional bodybuilding. That's what Marcus Philly created. Do you think of that? Like, are you ever in here like playing with like, okay, I'm gonna try to like, it's so hard, but I'm gonna try to invent or stylize a movement that no one is currently stylized. That way I could give it the Philly press or some kind of name and it becomes synonymous across. And again, that adds to the legacy and the talk trigger level of the brand.
Yeah. Here's my thoughts on that. Like, getting something to be stylized and look a particular way that's unique, that like is eye-catching, I think it can be a little short-sighted, because like when it comes to fitness and strength and conditioning, like we're not like discovering new things. We're just trying to get more people to do the same stuff, and how we package it and the feeling people have when they do it, that's what's different from like program to program or coach to coach. It's like, hey, you did a little bit more of this and it feels a certain way, or you did a little more of that. And if I'm taking like the basics of like, we're going to squat, we're going to hinge, we're going to push, we're going to pull, we're going to do some core work, we're going to do some single leg work, and these are the 50 core exercises. Like, if I can take something and maybe put a little delta on it, little spin, it makes it feel like a different stimulus for somebody slightly, but it's still a press, you know? So a Philly press, like, I didn't go out of my way to be like, let's do something totally different. It was like, I'm doing unilateral presses and I'm like, oh, okay, this feels a little different.
Locking it out behind the shoulder blade. Like,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Early on in functional bodybuilding and Awaken training series, I was doing a lot of like movement exploration, like let's take this exercise and let's change this. And, you know, it's why we have an exercise library on YouTube that's, you know, 2,500, 3,000 movements. Like, there's a lot of movements because there's there's 115 different dumbbell row variations on there. We just put together an email that was 114 dumbbell row variations. It was like this newsletter / blog article that got posted on a lot of different sites, and there was a YouTube that went along with it. It was great. It was like tons of good information in there, and a link to all 114 YouTube episodes or videos that we have on how to do a dumbbell row. It was like single arm dumbbell row, bilateral, with a band pull, pressing and pulling, and like, you name it, right? At some point, those I was really into the exploration of that, because I was in this world of doing the same 9 exercises freaking all the time. CrossFit. I was just like, I burpeed, power clean, thrustered. I did that, it was constantly varied. That was just how they were coordinated together. It wasn't the movements. Like, we did the same 10 things every day. And so I was thirsty for some variety, because it helped me get out of this, painful intensity, crush that I was in all the time. And I think a lot of people like that too. They were like, oh, this is fun. Like, I'm getting to try new things. But after some period of time, it's like, well, constantly changing up and doing new variations isn't actually effective from a progressive overload standpoint. Like, we have to have a foundation of very core movements that we do, and, a periodic, nuanced movement that you do in the training is fun and varied, and it gives you some good training reps, and it gets you out of the mindset of I have to lift this heavy, but the core of the training needs to be a little bit more simple. And one piece of feedback that we'll get from time to time is at least in the ATS days, man, it's just it's too many things to set up, and I'm having to watch videos all the time. And it's okay, well, that maybe got some attention, so I'll put some of those movements on social media. But when people arrive at the training, it's
simple.
It's got to be more simple, just so that they can have success. And I'm not trying to bait and switch, be hey, I showed you that I was doing this wacky movement over here, and now I'm just having you do Bulgarian split squats. It's no, it's always a bit of both. And I always like to show the simple stuff and some more complex movements online. But the foundation of FBB is here's very simple stuff to do that's elegantly balanced, and we have this whole concept of we're going to approach some of these sort of variation movements that you haven't seen very much to build what we call strength balance. And that's, so I think of more creating aspects of training, or formats of training, or sections of training that are really dedicated to the exploration of movement. And that might be the area that people when you're doing a functional bodybuilding program and there's back squats and there's strict press and there's Bulgarian split squats, no one's going to look at that and be oh yeah, that's functional bodybuilding. Yeah. But when it's time to do single arm dumbbell presses and, a kickstand goblet pistol squat,
gorilla
and
rows.
And, with jumping on a bike, people might be oh yeah, that's got a little bit of a, Marcus Philly functional pump conditioning format to it. I recognize that.
And you guys have recently Pump 40 is one of the newer releases, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So obviously a lot of feedback from your test groups, quicker, faster, get us in and out kind of scenario. Even when I document my workouts, and someone's like, man, it's a really long time. And I'm I always think of myself, I'm yeah, if I, when I think of someone who does this as a business, it's got to be so hard to put yourself in the mind, again, because you're busy, but you are not rushing to get to the gym in rush hour, having to squeeze in the workout in 30. It's just a different world. And I think it's so, and again, maybe most companies do this. I don't think I've ever asked, but having a test group like that, it's ahead. I think it's so simple and profound to do, and have a focus group to constantly feed off of on that front.
Yeah, well, yesterday was actually our first call with that focus group. We do a lot. They put their feedback into a Google sheet that I'm in every single week, and we're highlighting notes in there and making adjustments. But to actually speak with them, in a live Zoom was really, it gave me a big lift of okay, because one of the big questions we've had as a company, me and Satya talk about this often, is how are we going to get more usable and feedback from people? How do we get data from?
Qualitative.
Yeah. And even quantitative, but qualitative too. It's how do we get that? Now, the testers in our group are people have been around for 6+ months. They've been with us a long time. Like they're kind of really bought into the FBB world, but so they might not represent that new person that just found us last week and is like in their first week of persistence is like, I'm a little lost.
You always create that subset if you needed to.
We can try. We can try, but it's a lot to ask of somebody who's brand new to like, we need you to give feedback. We need you to do this. Like, we're not paying these people at this point, which maybe that's something that
pretty
you have
sure
to
an Instagram story saying that we're looking for people who've never done any of our programs.
Yeah.
And we're looking for 15 people. Here's an application, that kind of thing. I think you'd be able to pull it off.
Yeah, interesting. Well, anyway, that breathed some life into me because there was like feedback I got yesterday. It's like, yeah, like, so this is what I did and this is how I approached this. This is how it worked for me. But I could see in the eyes of like somebody who's pretty new, like this might be hard. Like confusing. They might be intimidated. Like, in the cool down, there's like passive hang, 3 minutes. And they're like, I can't hang from the bar for like 30 seconds. Like somebody might think that's super intimidating. I'm like, well, we need to put the note in about like, support your feet on a box, like make sure that you can, like, if you need to take breaks, like you can cut the time down, like
a set of rings horizontally. Yeah.
So anyhow, like those little notes and those feedback points were really valuable.
I'm really impressed with what you've done here, man. It's very, very cool from an online business perspective, and just talk about just CrossFit being the sun and all these things that have spun off. I've been really impressed, and because it gets, I think, fitness. Again, I think we swung so far to one end of the spectrum of CrossFit.
Yeah.
And it was going to take somebody to kind of bring it back where people I think naturally wanted to go, was more to the middle, but not all the way back to where we were with, bodybuilding and then 30 minutes of cardio afterwards kind of thing. So
yeah,
I'm beyond proud and grateful to say that I know you and I call you a friend and a colleague, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do next. And I really appreciate you taking out the time this weekend and to hang out and do this. I really do.
And I know it's been a while since we've had this even on the books, and just knowing that you were coming out, it was, it's like a month would go by, I'd be like, oh man, that's coming up. That's going to be fun. And so I love the content that you put out. I think I'm so impressed by just the way that you are constantly, giving, value to people, even when it's like free value. Like, hey, this is content. Here's some information I have. And, whether you opt in to like, come behind a paywall and get one of my programs or work with me in consulting, that's up to you, but I'm still putting this out. And, I definitely take a lot of inspiration from how you're approaching things. So it's great to connect, and I'm looking forward to the workout that's coming next.
Yeah, this will be good. We'll go do this. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Philly. Thank you, brother.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.